Working, and it looks like our streams are firing up. And I think we're just about live. If you're not a regular of the program, we do multi-stream, even though our home base is really on YouTube. Let's see. Let's make sure we're live across the board. And it looks like we are. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group. We're a criminal defense law firm based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. And my team and I, over the course of many years, we've helped represent thousands of good people facing criminal charges navigate through the criminal justice system. We've represented all sorts of different types of offenses. A lot of them are the typical crimes you might sort of imagine that we would see. Things like domestic violence, DUI, drugs, a lot of, weapons charges and those types of things. But we have also handled some of the really big types of cases that you've heard about. Things like murder, things like child pornography and misconduct involving children, sexual exploitation of a child, and all of those types of things. And some of that's going to be relevant today. Of course, today is we are now 7 days, 5 hours, 52 minutes away from the election. Can you believe that? 7 days, 5 hours and change. And then we're going to be right in the middle of the actual election night. It's right around the corner. It's kind of surprising how quickly it snuck up on us. But we're talking about some of those issues in the context of the vice presidential candidate or the presidential candidate's son, Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. They're sort of enmeshed in this ongoing drip campaign of negative information, negative materials that are being sort of really kind of just every single day a new release is coming out, and it's becoming this just cascade of information that we have to decipher. Now, before we dive into it, let me tell you a little bit about the program. So the name of the show is called Watching the Watchers. And as I mentioned, because we have represented so many people, we've seen a lot of misconduct, a lot of malfeasance, a lot of issues as they relate to police and prosecutors and judges. And yes, even the politicians, which is where we're going to be spending some more of our time on today's show. Now, before we dive into it, I want to just take a step back and talk a little bit about this Hunter Biden thing from a little bit of a higher viewpoint. So from an eagle eye view, 30,000 points, 30,000 feet up in the air type of thing. And the reason I want to do that is because there are some tools in a lawyer's toolbox, in our arsenal of things that we can use to analyze this situation. And specifically, we're going to do that today. I want to talk about the burden of proof. I want to talk about relevant evidence. There are rules for that. I want to talk about things called personal knowledge. These are things that we use as criminal defense lawyers, as prosecutors, as attorneys, just in general. We look to the federal rules of evidence, and we look to statutes, and we look to certain things like concepts from case law and from sort of the fundamental operating principles of being a lawyer. We can use some of these things in our analysis of the Hunter Biden situation. So I want to do that right now. Let's take a look at what is known as the burden of proof chart. Okay, you may have heard this before. When we typically are talking about the burden of proof, you may have heard this in movies or TV shows where they say, well, you have to prove a client or you have to prove that defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt is sort of the standard nomenclature that many people are familiar with as it relates to criminal law, but many people don't understand that there are all these other different tiers of potential culpability as it relates to legal issues. And so I want to run through those with you and keep this in mind, keep this in the context of the Hunter Biden situation, because with Hunter Biden, there is a lot of evidence that's floating around, and evidence, right? Some people would call it damning evidence. They'd call it the nail in the coffin type of material, or other people say this is unauthenticated. This is not even legitimate. This is disinformation from some foreign entity. And so how are we doing that? How can two people look at the same picture, look at the same news story, and one person find that this is totally damning and disqualifying, and other people find it to be completely irrelevant and distracting, not even something we should be talking about? How can that happen? Well, I think it's in large part because people have different standards. They're measuring this evidence according to different standards, to different levels and different levels of scrutiny. Some people have very low standards. Some people have extremely high standards, and it just varies. And so let's take a look at what is known as the burden of proof chart. You can find this image all over the internet if you just type in burden of proof, and it's going to look like this. And I want to run through and sort of explain how this works. So when we were talking about this idea of Hunter Biden being guilty If we're talking about criminal law, if we're talking about whether Hunter Biden or whether, any criminal defendant did something, the court, the prosecutor's office, they have to find that person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, it's the very highest tier up here at the top of this slide that you can see here, beyond a reasonable doubt. And underneath that, there are all these different levels of potential liability, right? At the very bottom, you can have no evidence. So if we go into a situation and there's just no evidence that anything happened, of course that person is not going to be guilty because we have no evidence. There's nothing there. Kind of a no-brainer there. No trace of evidence whatsoever. Then we move up the chart and we start to see we have what's called a scintilla of evidence. So that's kind of an old-fashioned word that has not really been sort of used in our modern-day vernacular anymore, but it is often used in case law and legal reasoning and legal opinions and things where they used to say this all the time, that there was just a scintilla of evidence, just a very minor amount. So any evidence at all, even the smallest measurable amount of evidence. And so I think most people would agree that at the very minimum, right, some of the Hunter Biden stuff would be here. So there's some evidence, even the smallest amount of evidence. I think people would hit that point right there. I think without any I don't even know how people could disagree on that, right? There's enough evidence out there floating around that there's something that we can look at. There is some evidence. Now, whether it's good or not, that's not what this question is asking. This question is just asking, is there a scintilla of it? Is there a small amount of measurable evidence? And the answer, I think, is yes. This next one up, you probably have heard also. It's called reasonable suspicion. And so this standard is really more analogous. So typically in most states, and again, I'm licensed in California and Arizona, so I can't speak to all of the states everywhere. But for most states, reasonable suspicion is what's required in order for an officer to pull you over. So let's say you're driving home from work and there is, you're weaving in and out of the lane, or you're following too close, or you're speeding, or an officer thinks that you made a wide right turn or a wide left turn or any one of those things. And an officer thinks that there's enough evidence there to stop you. They only really need reasonable suspicion. So let's say a DUI example, right? You're driving home, an officer thinks that you're going too fast and you're weaving within your lane, all right? Officer knows that those are different cues, those are different indicia of potentially driving under the influence, and so they'll pull you over. They don't need to pull you over based on, they don't need enough evidence to say you're absolutely guilty, or that, they can prove that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just enough to stop your car and pull you over. So that's it. It's just, weaving within a lane, a little bit, following too close. Some articulable basis for pulling you over is going to be enough. That's how low that standard is. And so here we can see it's the reasonable suspicion. It says should be based on specific or particular facts or reasons, not based on a hunch, not based on a guess. And so if we're talking about criminal law, okay, whether somebody should be convicted of a crime, reasonable suspicion is not enough. If there's only enough evidence to support a finding of reasonable suspicion, meaning it's not based on a hunch, there's some evidence, but there's probably a lot of doubt, there's probably a lot of other evidence that could come into play. Reasonable suspicion alone is not enough. So this is the scale that we're working up for Hunter Biden. But remember, there are different things that we're measuring here. We're talking about some potential criminality for Hunter Biden, but we're also talking about non-criminal things, okay? He's the son of the next potential president of the United States. So we're talking about other issues like electability and public office integrity and ethical violations and all of those things that are not even on this scale. There's a lot of basis why people are concerned about Hunter Biden that doesn't necessarily involve criminal behavior. So I want to just pause on that point right now. Not in terms of criminal liability. So in other words, if Hunter Biden is convicted of possessing, child pornography, certainly that's disqualifying. But just even the allegations alone, even though it may not be criminal, it may be enough to dissuade some other voters or have people, second guessing themselves about whether or not they're going to support Hunter Biden's father, Joe Biden. And so what I'm talking about right now is only on the criminal scale, but there are other scales that people are analyzing this story through. So I don't want to miss that point, but I do want to just keep walking up the stairs and showing you how this works. So we go back. Now we see that if we're analyzing the Hunter Biden situation, the question is there enough reasonable suspicion? So is there enough evidence that are specific and particular that we meet this burden, this hurdle? And I think the answer is yes here. It's not based on a hunch. Now we have enough material, we have enough evidence that's floating around, we have enough corroborating witnesses that I think that we meet that standard. I think the media, if they have looked into this stuff, if Twitter, Facebook, CNN, all of the mainstream media sources that really aren't covering the story, if they looked as hard as we've looked, I think that you could say that we're at least at the reasonable suspicion standard. I think it's kind of hard to disagree about that. Should be based on specific or particular facts. So it's reasonable to be suspicious. Okay, just think about that word. Is it reasonable to be suspicious about Hunter Biden? Yeah, I certainly think so. There's enough evidence out there. We don't know how authentic it is or how true it is, but there's enough there that it's okay to be suspicious and maybe inquire a little bit further. Unfortunately, a lot of the other media just has decided that that's not worth their efforts, but we certainly on the show are going to continue to dive into it. Moving up the chart here, we see that the next scale up is what's called probable cause. Probably have already heard this one as well. You don't have PC to stop me. You may have heard it in a Jay-Z song that, I've never been to law school, but I know enough that we need probable cause. And this is sort of in the popular vernacular as well. So reasonable suspicion and probable cause are a lot of things that you think about. But probable cause, think about this in the context of a warrant. So when we have spoken about Breonna Taylor on this channel, when the cops went and got a warrant, they needed to go and convince a judge that there was enough probable cause, there was enough information there that we deemed to be reasonable, that we thought was trustworthy based on the officer's investigations, that justified the cop or the judge giving the cops the ability to just go into Breonna Taylor's house. Right? It's probable cause enough to enter into a residence, to continue their investigation, to make an arrest, and to seize the evidence. And what we're talking about here with warrants is a little bit more particularity is one of the key words, the key language that we use when we're talking about warrants. So it's not just general. Reasonable suspicion is pretty general. Right? I'm just suspicious about what? I don't know. I'm going to look into it a little bit further. I'm going to pull you over, and then I'm going to investigate whether you've been drinking tonight, or whether you're in possession of drugs, or whether you've got some contraband, or any one of those things. So reasonable suspicion will lead an officer to continue their investigation, at which point they'll find probable cause, and then they'll be able to conduct an arrest. So the probable cause standard is also pretty low, but you can see here we're talking about reasonable and trustworthy information that a particular person has committed a particular crime. So you can see it's getting a little bit narrower. And probable cause is sort of where I think a lot of people are going to be diverging on the Hunter Biden stuff. So some people will say Tony Bobulinski is very trustworthy. Tony Bobulinski has some emails that indicate and specifically implicate Joe Biden or Hunter Biden, either one of those two people, and it's in violation of a particular crime. So it could be something like the failure to register as a foreign agent. This could be child pornography particularly. But the other side of the aisle is saying that this is not trustworthy at all. This is all Russian disinformation. This is all totally unreasonable. This is something that is clearly being made up in October, right before, literally 7 days away from an election, 7 days and 5 hours away from an election. And therefore, it cannot be trusted. It's really alleging nothing about a particular crime. And Hunter Biden is just in the crosshairs of this entire investigation because of the campaign. In other words, there's no legitimacy here. If this were taking place next year, if this investigation were happening next year, nobody would care, because it's just election year propaganda, smear campaigns, as we've been hearing from Joe Biden and his campaign. And so when we go back to the chart, we'll see reasonable, trustworthy about a particular person committing a particular crime. We also can talk about what's called preponderance of the evidence, the greater weight or amount of the evidence. This is a standard that we typically will see for a traffic violation. So preponderance of the evidence, at least in Arizona, what they're asking for is that if it's more likely than not, if there's enough evidence, it's more likely than not. It's called here on this chart, it said the greater weight or amount of evidence. So the way that we sort of analogize this, if it's 51% likely that you did something, the judge can find you responsible for being found guilty by a preponderance of the evidence, like 51%. If it's 51% likely, then they can say that that standard is met. Don't see this a whole lot in criminal law. This is one of those things that we see more often in traffic law, but preponderance of the evidence is sort of that standard. When we move up the next scale here, you're going to see that the next one up is what's called clear and convincing evidence. So preponderance was just the greater weight or the amount of the evidence. So again, 51%, if there's more evidence, if it's greater that 51%, is likely, or 60 or anything above that, then they can find you in civil law responsible for a traffic violation. When you move up to this next tier, we're talking about clear and convincing evidence. And this is the idea that a firm belief that the allegations are true. So it's very firm belief that the allegations are true. This is typically the standard that's used in habeas corpus petitions. In Arizona, we have a little bit of a different phrase. It's called proof positive and presumption great. So in other words, if you're looking at a situation, you're looking at the facts and you say, this is, we haven't had a formal trial yet to decide whether this person is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But based on what we're looking at here, man, it's looking pretty good. Case is looking pretty solid that this person did it. And so they're going to say it's clear. The evidence is clear. The evidence is convincing. We have not had a situation yet where we've had the opportunity to cross-examine that evidence or to bring in our own expert witnesses to refute it. But when a judge is deciding whether or not to say, let's say, release somebody on bond or release them back out into society after they've been arrested for a crime, they're going to be looking at that. Is there enough evidence here to convince me as a judge that the allegations are clear and that the evidence is convincing? If it is, then I'm going to hold that person in custody. But if the government can't show that, if they can't show that this person should be in custody or that there's clear and convincing evidence that that person committed a crime, then the defense is going to argue that that person needs to be left out of custody. They need to go, they need to be released, in other words. And again, all of these thus far are not guilty of criminal conduct. So all of these things are just not guilty. You can see here. If you move up to the next standard and you say there is reasonable doubt about the allegation. So if there's any doubt that's based in reason, any doubt, if you have one doubt and it's reasonable that you have doubts about that person's guilt, then you can't find that person guilty. You just can't. If it's any doubt based in reason, that is not beyond a reasonable doubt. So the only way you can get to guilty is if you're proving somebody who's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. There's no more doubt at all. There's not even a single doubt that's based in reason. You can have a bunch of unreasonable doubts, but any doubt that's based in reason, that's not enough. That person has to be found not guilty. And so the question here as we're going through this is, where does this evidence fall? And what standard are you using to analyze the evidence? There's a lot of evidence about Hunter Biden, and it's dripping out every day. And it's probably going to continue to drip out for the next 7 days from now until the election. But what standard are you using? Are you looking at this evidence and you're saying, I'm going to hold the criminal standard? If the evidence is less than anything that would find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, then basically at this point in time, I think you can throw out all of the evidence. All of it, because it's not there yet. We've not had our day in court. We've not had anybody present evidence. The prosecutors haven't even filed anything yet. We have seen that the multiple police departments have seen this evidence, and they've sort of kicked it around. It went to Delaware. They passed it off to the FBI. The FBI had the laptop since 2019, so they've been sitting on it for probably almost a year now. We don't know the exact dates yet, but for a very long time. And they've presumably had the opportunity to review this evidence, and no charges have been filed yet. Is that because the evidence is bad? Is that because there is, a cover-up with the FBI and the DOJ? Can't imagine that's happening, but who knows? So that's the question here. What are you analyzing? How are you analyzing this? And what level of standard do you think is most appropriate? Now, to back up a point that I said previously, we're not talking about whether Hunter Biden should go to jail. We're not talking about whether all this evidence falls on this scale. Okay, many people are not even using this scale. Many people are saying that this is all completely irrelevant. We're not trying to convict Hunter Biden here of a crime, but they are saying that there's enough here that would be disqualifying for somebody who is the vice or who is the president, the next potential president's son, literally in the middle of an election. That this type of conduct, this type of evidence is so concerning as to be disqualifying. And in particularly if it does implicate Joe Biden, which I think is still sort of forthcoming if there is any evidence there. I think that will be coming out in the next few days. And we'll talk about that today as this show unfolds. But that's the question. What are we talking about? What standards are we using? Because some people want to apply the full criminal standard to every shred of evidence, and I don't think that's fair. It's not right, because Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is not on a criminal trial right now in the media. He's in an election trial. He's in the middle of a campaign trial. And so the different standards that I think should apply should be much, much, much lower than beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I am a huge proponent of the criminal justice system and the high burden of proof. That's why I wanted to spend so much time on it, explaining it to you. It's very important, but it's important in the context of criminal charges. If Hunter Biden is charged with some offense, yeah, of course, he should be held to the same standard, and the government should be held to the same standard. The government should bring these allegations and charge them and hold them to the same standard that anybody else would be held to. And it seems to me currently that that's not exactly happening. So the question then becomes, what evidence are we talking about specifically? Is there anything that we can analyze or we can review to decide where it should fall on this scale? And let's talk about the characteristics of the evidence first of all. There's a word that I think is very appropriate in today's day and age, and it's a Russian word actually about some disinformation, about blackmail, about manipulation. It's called Kompromat. This is the word, if you look it up on Google, it's a Russian word called Kompromat. Compromising information collected for use in blackmailing, discrediting, or manipulating someone, typically for political purpose. The leak shows that Kompromat need not reveal anything illegal to be damaging. So this, just plug that word right into Google, and you can look it up yourself. Look about, where it came from, what the KGB does with it, what the Chinese do with it, what the U.S. has done with it. And, many people are saying that this is sort of what Epstein was doing. Having a lot of compromising materials on different world leaders, and that would give him leverage, that would give him power, that would make him the go-to to negotiate deals and to, make even more money and sort of secure his place in the world. And so I think this is essentially what we're talking about, right? Kompromat. This idea that a laptop with thousands and thousands of pictures of the most damning, incriminating evidence can just show up anywhere, and we're just going to look at it and take it to be true and trustworthy. I would agree, in a criminal trial, in a criminal case, if Hunter Biden is, formally indicted for any one of these crimes, the standard is going to be very high. We've talked about it on this channel. Things like chain of custody, things like authenticity, witness statements, corroboration, all of the cross-examination that would need to happen of every single person who was involved in the transfer and copying of the laptop. All of the material and data, seems to be duplicated multiple times. We need to see where it originated from, where it ended up. There's a lot of issues where this could derail criminal charges because of that. But that's because we're talking about a very high standard. For the national election, for Twitter, what is the burden of proof on Twitter? Well, it's kind of whatever they want it to be. If they want to just eliminate information because they don't like it, do they have to meet a certain threshold? Do they have to meet beyond a reasonable doubt? We have checked this information about Hunter Biden, and we have found he's not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Therefore, we're going to ban all of the information that goes out on our platform. Is that the standard they're holding? It is a pretty high standard. So are they just, making it so that anybody in the media, anybody talking about this, they have to prove it to such a certain extent? Otherwise, they won't share it? Or maybe should this stuff be shared and more publicly available at a lower standard? Maybe when there's reasonable suspicion, or maybe when there's just, a scintilla of evidence. Can we talk about things that have a scintilla of evidence? I think we should be allowed to. Why not? I'm pro freedom of speech, but a lot of these different companies say, no, it needs to be, much until their independent fact checkers review this stuff, they're not going to allow us to talk about it. So we are talking about Kompromat. It's a lot of this information. It does look a little bit too nicely wrapped with a bow on it, like a Christmas present made for the Trump campaign, literally, 2 weeks before the election started. So, all right, well, that's what we're talking about. It's going to be a lot. Now let's look to some other tools that we can use before we get into it, because there's some, even more allegations came out over the weekend. As a quick refresher, we try to keep this channel mostly PG. We just got notification that our last Hunter Biden story was age restricted, even though there was no images in it, to my recollection. I think very light on profanity, if any. But just because the story involves these words like child pornography, these things are going to get age restricted. So if you're not already a subscriber, I'd love it if you would subscribe. And if you also could, go ahead and share the video with with anyone else who you think this would be appropriate for, because the algorithm is just not sharing this content for us. All right, we got a couple super chats that just came in, so let me hit those up real quick. We had Gino. Wow, Gino with a 1999. Let's do a quick super chat. Let's check in on this before we dive into the rules. Gino with a 1999 super chat. He says, how is it? He says, I enjoy the show. How is it we always hear that no one is above the law, but it seems our lawmakers are? That's a great question. We're going to save that one. We had another super chat come in. USA Libertarian. If establishment politicians and officials are now too big to jail, do we need a fourth branch of government just to investigate the incumbents? Good questions. All right, so I'm going to keep those super chats coming in. I'm going to keep those for the end of the show when we dive into the chat. Miss Faith is doing an awesome job. She is back here, and she is now helping me with the things that I need help with, which we all know is a lot. So thanks everybody for being here. And let's get back into it. So when we're analyzing these issues, I did want to mention two rules from what are known as the federal rules of evidence. Okay, so when you're a criminal lawyer, when you're or any lawyer really, and you want to have a trial, when you want to go to court, when you want to cross-examine witnesses and submit exhibits and these things, there are rules. And there's a big book of them called the Federal Rules of Evidence. We spend a lot of time in this in law school talking about it, and you spend kind of your entire career, if you're a litigator, mastering these rules. Now, these are the federal rules, so we're going to be using those, but all the different states kind of have modified these in a lot of ways or adopted, big portions of these and discarded some of the others. So we're going to just use the Federal Rules of Evidence just so that everybody in the audience has an idea of where it kind of all starts with the federal rules. And the big question here, we already went through the scale, but what evidence is relevant? What evidence is irrelevant? What are the standards for getting evidence into court? So now, as the government is trying to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, there are rules that they need to follow in order to get evidence into court to do that. So before they can go up those steps, they need to provide some material. And how do they get that material into the court so that a jury can see it or so that a judge can see it? They have to follow the rules of evidence. What is the rule of relevancy with evidence? Here it is. It is the Federal Rule of Evidence, Rule 401, and we're talking about the test for relevant evidence. And you might be looking at this going, oh my gosh, it's like two sentences. It's exactly right, it is. Evidence is relevant if, and let's analyze this again in the Hunter Biden context. We have a lot of evidence about Hunter Biden. The question we're trying to answer here, is it relevant? Are the text messages relevant? Are the photographs relevant? Is the sex tape relevant? Is all of this information stuff that we as the public should be consuming? Should we be considering these things? Let's look to the federal rules and say what they say about it. Let's see if Twitter and Facebook are even following this standard from the Federal Rules of Evidence as to whether or not we should discuss these things. Here is the first part. Evidence is relevant. Where'd my mouse go? Evidence is resident. Evidence is relevant. All right, there we go. If it has any tendency to make a fact more or less probable than it would be without the evidence. One more time. If it has any tendency to make a fact more or less probable than it would be without the evidence. All right. And it also has to be of consequence in determining the action. So two things. It needs to be of consequence in determining the action. So this is basically saying it needs to matter. If we're having a conversation about, whether a person punched somebody in the face or not, what they had for dinner that night is probably not going to be relevant in determining whether they punched somebody in the face. If it has a tendency to make a fact more or less probable than it would be without the evidence. So let's go back to our dinner hypothetical. If you punch somebody in the face and the prosecutor wants to talk about what you had for dinner, that's probably not coming in. But if you punched the waiter in the face and the waiter had spit in your food and you ate some food that the waiter spit in, well, now what you had for dinner is probably going to be relevant because you can say that the food, we had a burrito now, and there was a spit, spit in the burrito. Therefore, that was the motive that caused that individual to punch somebody else in the face. And it now becomes of consequence. It now becomes relevant. It's a very, very, very low standard. If it makes a fact more or less probable, and if it's of any consequence in determining the next step or determining the action, It's relevant. Very, very low bar. So without any question in my mind, all of these allegations, almost all of this evidence about Hunter Biden is relevant to Hunter Biden. Now, some of it, I would argue, is not particularly relevant to Joe Biden. Okay, the Hunter Biden stuff where he's, smoking crack and having sex with somebody, is that really relevant to Joe Biden? It's arguable, right? You can make the argument that it's Kompromat. It's compromising material. Joe Biden loves his son, and he's going to do anything for his son. So if the Chinese have all of these images in their hard drives and they can blackmail Hunter Biden, you could argue that maybe that goes up to Joe Biden. Therefore, that evidence is relevant. On the other hand, if Hunter Biden just has a drug problem and maybe a money problem and a sex problem, what does that have to do with Joe Biden running the country? Right? You can make that argument. Don't think it's necessarily a good one, but if we're talking about relevancy, almost all of the evidence is relevant. How is it not relevant? And you have to ask yourself, what is it relevant to? In this case, we're talking about the next president of the United States. We're talking about the election. We're not talking about guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. We're talking about people being able to make a judgment as to whether or not Joe Biden and his family should be occupying the White House. Pretty relevant, all this stuff. So that is according to the federal rules of evidence. I don't even know how you can make an argument that it's not relevant. But for some reason, Twitter, Facebook, and a lot of the big news companies have made that very claim. Now, let's talk about another rule in the federal rules of evidence. This one is about personal knowledge. So we're talking about witnesses being able to come into court to testify. And up until this point in time, or at least last week, we had a lot of reporters, we had a lot of the media saying that none of this stuff was relevant because we couldn't authenticate it. Nobody had any personal knowledge about this. So there were no credible witnesses who could come in and talk about any of this stuff. And then we started to have Tony Bobulinski come in, and then we had Hunter Biden's ex-co-business partner who's in jail, who just got moved. We covered his story last week. I forget the name, but there's a lot of people who've now come up. They're bubbling up. They continue to do so, and the question is, are they credible? What do the rules require that they know or that they are able to discuss? Right? There must be a list of things in order to make this person credible. Well, let's see what the rules say. Here's what it says. A witness may testify to a matter only if evidence is introduced sufficient to support a finding that the witness has, here it is, personal knowledge of the matter. Personal knowledge of the matter. Evidence to prove personal knowledge may consist of the witness's own testimony. So you don't even need metadata from emails. You don't even need formal hard drives. You don't need any of that stuff. You just need the witness's own testimony. You don't actually need an actual carbon copy of the hard drive or any of these things. It's just personal knowledge. That's a pretty low standard. Let's look at that again. Rule 602 from the Federal Rules of Evidence. A witness may testify to a matter only if evidence is introduced sufficient to support a finding that the witness has personal knowledge. All right, so maybe some emails would work there. If Tony Bobulinski had some emails and there's evidence of that, then he's got personal knowledge of that, and he should be sufficient. Evidence to prove personal knowledge may consist of the witness's own testimony. Wait a minute, so he doesn't even need the emails. He doesn't need any of that stuff. He can just come forward and say, hey, I have personal knowledge of all of this stuff, similar to what we saw with the Kavanaugh hearings. Remember that? She had personal knowledge, very little evidence about anything against Judge Kavanaugh. It's very low standard, personal knowledge, and they can come in and testify. Now, this rule does not apply to expert witness testimony, which is a totally different rule under Rule 703. But that's it. That's the standard. So based on these two rules that are in the law under the Federal Rules of Evidence, you can go Google those things. All of this evidence, in my mind, is relevant, and it's all perfectly sufficient to support further inquiry into Joe Biden, into Hunter Biden, and the entire Biden campaign and sort of the extended tentacles of where this leads. It's all relevant. It's all available. If we can find people who have personal knowledge of this stuff and they want to come up and talk about it, then we should be talking about it. Those are according to the rules. And once again, the media is just not even following those very, very low standards, and it is unfortunate. All right, so let's talk about where is this Kompromat going now that we know how these rules work, now that we know what the burden of standard is. I know this is a legal heavy show, but we're going to lay out the foundation, and then we're going to start going through the evidence here, right? And it's not particularly good. Where did this evidence come from? Where did this Kompromat come from? Well, over the weekend, we had a new player enter the game, and this was somebody by the name of Guo, how do I say it? Guo Wenji. Guo Wenji. I'm going to show you his name here in a minute. Here is his name. So this comes from the Press California website, and they actually pulled this directly from his website. So there's a let me lay that out a little bit better. There is a individual by the name of Guo Wenjiao. Trying to pronounce his name threw me off. This is an ex-Chinese dissident. He's a billionaire. He's really, really interested in overthrowing the Chinese Communist Party, and he wants to he's fled to the United States, and he's really been spearheading a lot of this daily drip. There's a lot of information that he's in close contact with Trump's ex-campaign manager, Steve Bannon. He's obviously highly partisan. At least in this context. I don't know how he votes or whatever, but at least in this context, this information is being, without any question, this information is being leaked to damage Joe and Hunter Biden. There's no question about that. I would not even deny that. I think you can say with 100% certainty that this is intended to throw Biden's campaign off and to secure Trump's reelection victory. Now, a lot of people have issues with that because they're saying these are foreign influences meddling with our election. And to me, that just sounds like a major distraction. It's like, okay, if this ex-Chinese citizen dissident is telling us that the Biden family is compromised, yeah, I get it that the motivation behind why they want that information leaked isn't particularly wholesome, but the information, if it's good, it's damn concerning for the United States. We as citizens should be highly concerned about that. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter if it's the Russians or the Chinese or the Iranians, or if somebody drops a big dossier of Trump malfeasance on my desk, I'm going to be highly concerned about it just because the Russians sent it over to me. If the information is accurate and legitimate, shouldn't we be concerned about that? I don't know why we're spending so much time worrying about where the information came from. If the information is good and it shows that there are serious concerns with these individuals, why would we want them in the White House? Why would anybody want them in the White House? I don't know. All right, so that is the backdrop. Now, this individual over this past weekend, Guo Wenjiao, has, and I apologize for butchering the name, has been releasing information every day, and it's pretty damning stuff. So let me tell you about him. Let me tell you about him from his perspective, and then I'm going to tell you about him from Wikipedia's perspective, which is pretty different. So we have here, this comes from Press California. He goes by Lude. It's the founder of Lude Media, which is a program channel, YouTube, March 2017. Considers himself to be a whistleblower. He wanted to create an independent news platform that can disseminate truth about the CCP. He started the whistleblower movement. He believes that he's going to be the perfect gravedigger for the CCP. Whistleblowers movement, they played a leading role in debunking the CCP deception, spreading the truth. He says that there's a couple interesting plans that the Chinese have in place. Number one, that they want to basically control the internet, influence different people through payoffs, and then they want to assert control over key people through sex and seduction. So they call it the blue, gold, yellow plan. Also a 3F plan, which is to foment weakness in America, foment chaos in America, and foment the destruction of America. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. That is from his own website. It's from his own media. Now, here's what Wikipedia says. Wikipedia says that they don't even really know who this guy is. Born May 1970, or maybe it was October 5th, 1968. He's got multiple names. He's a Chinese billionaire businessman. He became a political activist, and he controls Beijing Zenith Holdings and other assets. 73rd among the richest in China. He was accused of corruption, misdeeds by Chinese authorities, fled to the U.S. after learning he was going to be arrested for all these allegations: bribery, kidnapping, money laundering, fraud, and rape. Despite Guo's claims of being a whistleblower, his statements were unable to be verified by newspapers such as the New York Times, which who really cares what the New York Times authenticates or doesn't or verifies, because they don't attempt to verify anything as far as I can tell. All right, so you've got these two competing stories. Now, a lot of people are also saying that, yeah, anytime somebody sort of makes too much money in China, China just says you're ripping off everybody, and they just start accusing you of those crimes: money laundering, kidnapping, all the sex crimes. We kind of saw this with Julian Assange, right? As soon as you start to anger people, the first thing they do is start lobbing these accusations at you. You know, you're a pedophile, you're a child pornographer, all these things, which is, by the way, exactly what's happening to Joe Biden. Okay, so if you're going to be using these same allegations, Hunter Biden, I meant, if you're going to be using these to discredit Guo Wenjiao, well, if you're going to say this guy's a rapist, okay, well, there's some of those style of accusations being alleged at Hunter Biden too. So, be careful with how you're sort of using these things. So that's the background on that guy. Now, over the weekend, you may have seen it. Hopefully you didn't, but there was a sex tape that had been released through this individual and through his website, and they are purportedly in close contact with Steve Bannon. And this entire thing is just this drip campaign is happening through this man's media entities. That sex tape came out. And at the end of that, there were some screen grabs, which have made sort of the headwaves or the headlines for the people who are covering the story. And here is what it says. So at the end of the sex tape, we see here there are two different still frames. They say, "We apologize if this photo has caused you any serious discomfort, but it is for the sake of justice that we, the new federal state of China, have made this picture public because the friends of the communists are our enemies." So he must be talking about the Bidens. "They take advantage of all those Western politicians, celebrities, and their families who are greedy for Chinese wealth and threaten them by getting hold of and recording their sex and drug videos. Kompromat, forcing them to sell out their countries and people and even their own national security in order to cooperate with the Chinese Communist Party's world domination." Right. And that's kind of exactly what we were talking about with this idea of kompromat. This, they are going to be entrapping and ensnaring people in a situation that is going to give them leverage when their families or their contacts move into positions of power. And so is that happening here? Right. Arguably, yeah, you could argue that this laptop, maybe it was from the Chinese, maybe it was from Steve Bannon, maybe it was from Rudy Giuliani, maybe it was from who knows where it came from. Maybe it was from Julius Assange or the Russians. I don't know. But why does a single laptop have 10,000 pictures of all of this stuff incriminating? I mean, it sounds like if you came and told me, yeah, this was packaged gift wrapped as kompromat from some foreign entity, I'd say, sure, that makes sense. Does that mean that you get to discredit all of the evidence on there? Maybe it's really good evidence. Maybe it's so damning because it's true, right? And that's what this entity is saying. Now, as soon as he released this stuff, so this was released on Saturday, he ended up getting banned, I think, from all the different platforms. Multiple videos, multiple images, so show sexually explicit scenes while using drugs. It was shared on the Chinese video platform. It's called GTV. The Chinese digital video platform is linked to Steve Bannon, who's a former Trump senior advisor. I don't know if he was campaign manager, but he's definitely a senior advisor. Video came from Hunter's laptop, according to the GTV, and the video at the end, or the still frames were what I just showed you there at the end. Now, because he was banned all over the place, he's still existing on Twitter, so you can actually go and check him out. I'm sorry, on Parler, not Twitter, on Parler, which is the free speech alternative to Twitter. And here is what he just posted literally today, a few hours ago. So this is Lude, and he is now echoing, which is sort of like a retweet on Twitter, echoing this information from another person who is called Wen Fengel. And this is a lot of this stuff is available on their website. Now, I don't speak Chinese. I don't read Chinese. I don't know anything about Mandarin, but this is allegedly what it says. Breaking: Obama negotiated $1 billion with CCP after his supporting CCP to militarize the South China Sea, which is a whole different topic between the Taiwan nation and the Chinese. It's a very complicated area of political diplomacy and world affairs we won't get into here. But Joe Biden took video on the deal between Hunter B. and Obama in the White House. Hunter B. backed up this video and bargained with the CCP. The deal included that America sold sensitive military technologies to the CCP and sold the CIA informants who were inside the CCP. Obama was the running dog, and CCP completely controlled by the CCP. The video of Joe will be revealed soon, which is the evidence of crimes. Sleepy Joe is a joke, whatever, okay? Trump 2020 will win, mega. All right, so that's what they're claiming, is happening. Now, they have been slowly dripping this stuff out basically every day. This is, I think, the image that they're talking about, that this was Hunter Biden in the Oval Office with Joe Biden. So the question there was, well, who was recording this video, right? This happened October 4th, allegedly, 2016, 5:19, 2 p.m., 2002 out of 24,876 photos. So if this is coming from G News and this is one of 25,000 photographs, and this was actually a video that was being recorded by maybe Joe Biden, who was taking this picture, that is a big claim. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. Whether that is beyond a reasonable doubt, absolutely not. It doesn't meet anywhere close to that standard, right? At this point, this evidence right here is basically near the bottom. It's essentially no evidence, right? It's that allegation that we just saw. There's nothing there. This could just be a regular photo of Obama and Hunter Biden, who is the vice president's son, just having a conversation in the Oval Office, right? It could be that. There's no evidence of any allegations here. Not yet. They're claiming it's going to be released later. But the question is, right, for each one of these tidbits of evidence, where are we measuring it? What are we looking at it as? And here, this is very low at this point. But so was a lot of the other evidence. Remember how this works. We're slowly walking up the chain. We're walking up the stairs. 2 weeks ago, all of the evidence was no evidence. But now a lot of it is working its way up, and some of it's getting even closer to the higher levels where they become seriously problematic. Now, there's more evidence that came out over the weekend. The Daily Mail is indicating that there was some sort. They released an article very recently that was talking about Hunter Biden and talking about his drug problem, essentially. And I want to be very careful here, right? Drug problems, I have a lot of empathy for. Alcohol problems, I have a lot of empathy for. I had a lot of issues with alcohol myself after my family went through a situation. So I empathize with it. A lot of the people we work with have drug and alcohol problems. This is not something that I want to beat up on him for. That being said, our clients are not the president's son. Our clients are not. I was not the president's son. I was not running for office, right? It's a little bit of a different standard. When you jump into the political realm, when you go into that sphere, you play by a different set of rules. You play by a different set of standards. You agree to make your financial statements mostly available and file FEC disclosures and all sorts of stuff. And so when you're running for president, or your son is has already been in the White House and is very close to being back essentially in the White House, that's concerning. And so as we're going to go through some of this additional information, specifically related to the drug stuff and, looking at these text messages and things, it feels a little bit, to me, it just feels a little bit gross, honestly, to be diving into this stuff. But because he is running, Hunter Biden is not running for office. Joe Biden is running for office. But Hunter Biden and Joe Biden have been, by my reading of the evidence thus far, have been in close contact, close proximity, have worked in enough deals together that there is enough to be concerned about here. So we are going to dive into this. Now, another caveat on this. I have a lot of empathy for Hunter Biden. I really do. I don't know the man, obviously. I don't know anything about him. He hasn't spoken much about a lot of this stuff, but let's put this in context, okay? Even though for many people he's a political enemy, Joe Biden is going to be the end of America. If he gets elected, the country's in turmoil. It's goodbye USA, according to many people. I don't believe that. I don't believe that about Trump. I don't believe that about Joe. I don't believe that about Kamala. I don't believe that, and didn't believe that about Obama, right? It can be very vitriolic. It can be very intense. The volume's very high right now. But let's remember, we're dealing with human beings. We're dealing with people, and people can be broken. And just because they're broken doesn't mean it's a good time to dogpile on them and treat them as less than human. Hunter Biden is somebody who lost his mom when he was 2 years old. He was in the car. He was injured as well. I think he lost his mom and his aunt when he was 2 years old. He lost his brother to a brain tumor. He's obviously had a lot of drug problems in his life. He's been the son of the vice president for 8 years, in his 40s. He's 50 years old now, I think. Joe Biden's been in office for 47 something years. And he's been the son of a senator for a long period of time, so you're dealing with a lifestyle that is totally different than yours or mine. So it's hard to say how you would react in that same situation. Now, I don't condone any of his activities. I'm not excusing them, but I am just saying, as we're going through this, maybe let's have a little bit of empathy for his situation, his, the stresses that he's under, and all of those different things. That's it. It's a messy thing. Being a human being can be difficult. And I see that a lot in our practice. I've seen it a lot in my own life. And so the point of this analysis is not to go in and just slam dunk on Hunter Biden or the Bidens, but it is to talk about and discuss real serious concerns that, in my opinion, have been totally neglected by the rest of the media. If they were talking about this thing every day, I wouldn't be talking about it. I truly wouldn't. It doesn't pleasure me to talk about these issues. It's a sad state of affairs to watch a person live their life like this and do these types of things. I don't welcome it. There's a lot of resources to help him through this, but it sounds like he's kind of foregone those things in lieu of his activities. So let's dive into it now. The biggest question that I had, or that the Daily Mail brought up before we dive into that story, is about the sobriety. So apparently Hunter Biden for a long period of time was sober, had gotten over his drug problem, and then something happened in his life that caused him to go on a relapse. And this apparently happened after Hunter and his wife, Melissa, they got into an argument. He rented a $2,300 a night mansion, which looks like this, and he threw a party, allegedly. This is according to the Daily Mail. And many people are now indicating or thinking that this may be where the pictures emanated from. So the picture of him smoking a crack pipe, the pictures of him engaging, or the videos of him engaging with another woman. They're saying that this all took place at this residence. And the Daily Mail, I think, found this picture. So that this house in particular was 20 miles away from where his wife was, where his 7-month-old baby was. And then the story says that when he got back home, that Melissa basically begged him to go back to rehab. It's devastating stuff. It's devastating. Okay. He may be a political enemy to some people. It's devastating to have a wife and a daughter at home, to have a husband go and do those types of things. It wrecks families. It's awful, awful stuff. And so I don't think anybody should be, glorifying that fact. To even talk about this evidence, it's a sad state of affairs, because what is happening to Hunter's daughter, what's happening to his wife, we can only imagine. So I hope that they are being strong as the country is wading its way through this ordeal. Now, that being said, the reason we started this program called Watching the Watchers is because we want people to be held to the same standards. I have seen many people go to prison for drug offenses, many of them. It's a sad thing. It's sad that they have a drug problem. It's sad that our society is so ridiculous with drug offenses, and they want to punish people and penalize them for the rest of their lives. If the politicians are going to pass laws that you and I have to live by, why are their children not living by those laws? Why are the politicians themselves not living according to those laws? And so when I saw Hunter Biden with multiple crack pipes in his mouth in multiple different locations, the question then becomes, well, what would the godfather of mass incarceration, Crime Bill Joe Biden, what would he do if he was prosecuting his son? What would Kamala Harris, the top cop Kamala, what would she do if she were prosecuting Hunter Biden? Would he get the same penalties that you or I would? Well, clearly not, right? Let's take a look back at what Joe Biden wanted to do with his 1994 crime bill. So this came from Brookings Education, the Brookings Institute. It said, one thing is clear: the 1994 crime bill interacted with and reinforced an existing bill, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, which we've already covered here. Under this bill, a person was sentenced to a 5-year minimum sentence for 5 grams of crack cocaine. It took 500 grams of powder to trigger the same sentence. Crack is cheaper, means that it is more prevalent in low-income communities, including, black and urban areas. All right. 5-year mandatory minimum for crack cocaine. If he's smoking crack cocaine, and there's other images floating around of him doing that, and there's other images floating around of him having a scale that has a lot of crack cocaine on it, the penalty for that under Joe Biden's criminal justice vision, remember, he authored the 1994 crime bill. Joe Biden passed the law, wrote it, passed it. It got passed into law by the Senate, signed into law by the president. If Hunter Biden were caught under that provision, 5 years mandatory minimum prison. But that's not going to happen here because they play by a different set of rules. The question that comes next is, what does Joe Biden say about all of this? We have asked this question many, many times. On Saturday, the 24th, Joe Biden was asked a question and he gave a response. This is the first response that I saw where he actually says that this is not true. The first time I've heard it. Now, he may have said it elsewhere. Previously, and even during the debate, he was using the language saying that there's no basis for it. Remember, he said that during the debate, this last debate, he said there's no basis for it. And 50-something people from the defense contingency in the United States, all agreed there's no basis for it, but he never actually came out and said it's not true. It's a lie. It's a flat lie. He says that here. Now, so I want to play this. It's kind of a short clip, but listen closely. He does say it's a lie. It's a flat lie. There is no controversy around my son, which I think is highly debatable. Let's take a look at what Joe Biden has to say here.
Questions and controversy continues today about Hunter Biden, your son's.
There is no controversy about my son.
Dealing,
it's
just
all
questions.
a lie. It's a flat lie because the president has nothing else to run on. If you notice, while American people are talking about what's happening to their families, he has no plan. In the debate, he has no plan. Everything from the Wall Street Journal, every other major news outlet has said what he's saying is simply not true about my son.
Yeah, so... Oh, man. So, first of all, there is pretty clearly a controversy. If one party wants to talk about something and one other party does not want to talk about something, that's kind of a controversy, right? If one person wants to do something, the other person doesn't, that is a controversy. And that's the definition of a controversy. You have disagreements about a particular course of action. A lot of people want to talk about this issue. A lot of other people don't want to talk about this issue. So for Joe Biden to come out and say there is no controversy is just wrong. There's clearly a controversy. That's why you're being asked about it. Now, the next point is where he's actually on the record now saying it's a lie. It's a flat lie. So I'd love some more inquiry, deeper inquiry on that. What is a lie? All of this information? Are you saying that the sex tape is a deep fake, or the images are not accurate, or these emails have been doctored? What is a lie specifically? Is it the lie that Hunter Biden did something wrong, or is it the lie that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden did something? So is he separating himself out from Hunter Biden? I don't know. That came out on Saturday. Every other news outlet is saying that. He goes on and he says every major news outlet is saying what he is saying is about my true is not son. So again, it's not true. So again, he's deferring this out to the other news agencies. He's saying they also agree with me that there's no basis for this. So he's using that same line. So we'll see if his opinion on this narrows down a little bit, if his answer gets a little bit more tight as these leaks continue. But we're starting to see some sort of a response now from Joe Biden. Predominantly, they were just not answering it. They weren't even being asked about it. Now he was asked about it. Now he's saying it's a lie. It's not true. What is he specifically talking about? So as these leaks continue to drip, are we going to have a modification of Joe Biden's answer over the next coming days? There is more information coming out. So we've seen over the weekend, Jack Posobiec actually came out and said that the FBI has had the laptop for a long period of time. Apparently, this guy, Jack, has access to the data, which is why I've been following him so closely. Apparently, he has it, or he can arrange access to it. And so we're going to see a couple of screen grabs where he is actually making that offer to Mark Cuban. He says, Scoop, DOJ tells One American News Network that FBI dropped the investigation of Hunter Biden's laptop because they did not believe the shop owner's story would hold up in court. Right? And maybe so. Although Mac provided them with evidence, they found zero evidence of foreign involvement. So again, it goes back to that chart, right? That scale. The FBI may have looked at it and said, yeah, this is not going to hold up in court. We have a bad chain of custody. We don't have any witnesses. They could have made that claim, and they probably could have justified it. I think it would have been extremely weak, but they could have done it. If they did it for a political basis, even more so, right? They could have come up with any reason as to why this was not authentic or not legitimate, and it wouldn't have held up in court. So that is the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. But what we're talking about here is a much lower standard, whether people want to vote for the guy or not. And that standard, I think, has been met. We move on. We see that Adam Housley is now indicating that it's very simple to anyone who attempts to question. DOJ and DNI both verify laptop is legitimate, and Russia had zero to do with it. FBI, after seeking contents in November 2019, came back with a grand jury subpoena. Took less than 2 weeks. Nothing has been disproven. Nothing. So we showed you that subpoena from the district court. And so kind of conflicting information here. So Jack is saying that there is, the FBI looked at this stuff and didn't do anything with it. Adam is coming back and saying that no, they've confirmed that they have it and they actually reviewed it and got the subpoena. So the evidence is looking a little bit better there, actually, right? Rudy Giuliani came back out just this past week. He said that I finally got the FBI to start investigating a laptop they had for over 8 months. So we know that they've had it for a while. Turns out to be valid. And then he wants an apology. The final story that the next person I wanted to share a response from was Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban, you can see here, says he's responding to somebody else. He says, it's crazy. The repair shop owner is legally blind, but somehow saw a sticker that can't be found anywhere else, personally looked through the laptops, ran software that seems to have miraculously recreated the entire drives, and asked for a special keyboard be brought in to link to a laptop. Which, you know, I think, okay, some of that stuff is weird, but some of it isn't. He personally looked through the laptops. All right, so what? They were his property. He ran software that seems to have miraculously created the entire drive. So what? You can find them anywhere. I did a quick search on this. Hard drive, how do you clone an Apple hard drive? Here's 4 videos immediately, plus a step-by-step guide from Mac sales. And I'm not even a computer expert. He needed a special keyboard for some reason. Okay, don't know what that means. Or he saw a sticker that can't be found anywhere else. I don't know, but he was offered by Jack to have a look at it. So he says, Jack says, want to have a look at the laptop yourself? Bring your own cyber team. Happy to set it up. Completely serious. Mark, you're a straight shooter. FBI says the FBI has one in its custody. Same serial number. Again, I don't really know why that matters too much unless you're proving criminal chain of custody. If you wanted to prove for a criminal case that Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, actually was in possession of, let's say, child pornography, then yes, you're going to want the exact hard drive, right? You're going to want it from the exact laptop because that is the evidence. Hunter Biden wasn't in possession of a copy of of a hard drive. He wasn't in possession of that. They copied that external from his possession. So if you want to find him guilty of something and meet that high standard beyond a reasonable doubt, I think Mark Cuban's right that you do need that high standard. But if you're just talking about the standard of whether or not a person should be elected president and whether their son has any impact on how that presidency would go, it's a much lower standard. And I happen to agree with some of Mark's statements here. He says, sure, I'll get a team to take a look. I hope that happens. But why not just share it online? Would be fun to see if all the email metadata is there. I totally agree with that. Completely agree with that. Would love to see all of the evidence. And I've made this point here on this channel. If Rudy Giuliani keeps dripping this stuff to his own, trusted news networks, which he seems to be doing right now, he's let OANN look at it. He's let the New York Post look at it. Apparently Steve Bannon has a copy of some of this stuff because the Chinese are now dripping this out, or the ex-Chinese, dissidents are now dripping this stuff out. So if they all have it, and it's not illegal, these emails and things, why are they not posting it online? Why do we not see some of this stuff? Or at least let's see the headers of the emails. I'd like to see some of that. Maybe there's another reason that I'm missing as to why this stuff can't be disclosed, but I think that at this point it should be. I understand they want to keep dripping this stuff out. They don't want to release everything at once because it'll all just get buried. But the stuff that has already been released, all of the previously released emails and text messages and everything else, why is that stuff not more accessible? There's a lot of people out there with better tech backgrounds and more, a deeper ability to dive into these things than me. Why are they not allowed access to these things? And Jack also gave this over to Joe Rogan. Hey, Joe Rogan, interested in getting a look at the laptop? Happy to arrange. Do not think that will happen. But are we done? Is that the end of what's coming? Doesn't quite look like that. Why would it be? Because there's still time left in the election. And so Sean Davis reported, we talk about Sean a lot on this program, follow him. Sean MDAV does good work over at The Federalist. He says, breaking, Tucker Carlson's show tomorrow night will be devoted entirely to an interview with Tony Bobulinski, the Biden family insider turned whistleblower, whose explosive emails show that Joe Biden himself was deeply involved in Hunter's foreign business dealings. Now, according to a source, Bobulinski will play recordings of Biden family operatives begging him to stay quiet and claiming Bobulinski's revelations will bury the reputations of everyone involved in Hunter's overseas deals. Not good. Not too good. Tony Bobulinski from Tucker Carlson says he met with Joe Biden about China. He met with Joe Biden about China. The media have suppressed the story, but it's real and it matters. Voters have a right to know. Bobulinski sits for an extended interview tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Okay, remember our standards. Remember the different burdens of proof. May not be enough to find somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but does that meet reasonable suspicion? I think it does. Does that mean probable cause? I think it does. Remember, we're talking about an articulable person and a particular crime. Particularity. Here, we're talking about all sorts of bribery, corruption crimes, foreign registration crimes, conspiracy, all sorts of different things. And according to that standard, I think we should talk about it, but we'll see. We will know more tomorrow about Mr. Bobulinski. Now, these other allegations, they continue on. We have a U.S. Senate candidate for the state of Delaware who has made a pretty interesting announcement here today. She said that, this was on October 20th. This was 6 days ago. Information on the Hunter Biden hard drive from a police source here in Delaware. The laptop was turned over yesterday to the Newcastle County PD. That is because Newcastle County PD have jurisdiction over the Biden family, because that's where the Bidens live, in Newcastle. According to our police source, that police department confirmed the laptop contained child pornography. Oh, no. All right. Another one. Chanel Rion from OAN says multiple reporters have now viewed the emails, photos, and videos on the Hunter Biden hard drive. We confirm there appear to be not one, but several images of a minor that justify immediate attention. We have reason to believe the minor is a U.S. citizen. All right. So very, very careful here, folks. Very careful. If you're with OANN and if you're with, any of these other reporting agencies and you're going around and voluntarily looking at child pornography, that is concerning. Not okay to be doing that. I've had this conversation on this channel previously, but when a defendant is charged with a crime like that, there are very specific rules about how you can view that material. It's very, very protected. So if Giuliani or whomever is in possession of these hard drives is just saying, "Come on down, let's take a look at some child porn," that's not okay. So I would, highly, highly advise all of these people who want access to that portion of this material to, back up a little bit. If you want to look at emails and metadata, that's a separate thing. Child pornography is a whole different ballgame. And this idea that, that quite frankly, multiple OAN reporters have now viewed the emails, photos, and videos, and they can confirm that there are several images of a minor that justify immediate attention that might be child porn. Be very careful about that. Let's take a look very quickly, before we get over to the live chat. I know this is a long show. We still have a little bit more to get to. Oh, man, we kind of have a lot more to get to. Oh, no. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a quick look at the sex exploitation of a child statute. Here it is. Sexual exploitation of a child, according to Delaware law, that a person knowingly photographs or films a child engaging in a prohibited sex act or in the simulation of such an act, otherwise knowingly creates a visual depiction. That doesn't apply. So subsection number 1, knowingly photographs, films, or a child engaging in a prohibited sex act is going to be child exploitation of a minor. So if there's any photograph that meets that, engaging in a prohibited sex act, that's it, right? That's it. We've got another statute here. Dealing in child pornography. So if you knowingly ship, transmit, mail, transport, including by computer, any book, magazine, blah, 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 that depicts a child engaging in a prohibited sex act or the simulation, or knowingly ships, and so on and so forth, then that person can be guilty of dealing in child pornography, which is a Class B felony. And there seems to be even some more smoke around this one. So a number of emails were also released this past weekend, and there's some conversation about, in particular, Hunter Biden having inappropriate relationships with minor children or with young women in his family. I don't know the age, but he actually uses the term sexually inappropriate with children, which is why I mentioned that. So we see here, apparently this is from these texts came out today. Hunter Biden sent the text to a family friend saying that someone is accusing him of being sexually inappropriate with their daughter. Says he's not allowed to be alone with that person. Hunter says that his mom, Jill Biden, says that Hunter is sexually inappropriate around children. So all this is blurred out for some reason, but he says, tell people I'm sexually inappropriate with their daughter. If any one of you repeat that, I swear to God, I might as well, die by suicide, and so on. So you can read this. Why I can't come home. I will not survive. No one could survive that. She is stupid. She is reckless. She is evil. And if you can't get her to see, this is the reason I'm not allowed to be alone with so-and-so, because there are these allegations of sexual improprieties. My mom tells him things like, I'm sexually inappropriate with the children. So tell me, please, how do I keep my kids without killing myself in the process? So, he's in obviously a lot of pain here, right? These allegations are serious allegations. If he is sexually inappropriate with children, he should not be around children, and that would include his own kids. And, that's concerning. very concerning. But again, where does this fall? Is this guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? No, not even close. It's just a text message. It's very, very low. Is it no evidence? No, it's not. Is it a scintilla of evidence? It's probably a little bit more than that. If you read these text messages, do you think that it would be reasonable to be suspicious about these text messages based on what you just read? I think so. I think you can read that when he is voluntarily telling other people that other people are accusing him of being sexually inappropriate with their daughter and doing things so much that they're not allowed to be alone with that person. That's concerning. That is enough basis to be reasonably suspicious. Might even be enough to support a warrant and meet that probable cause standard to do a further investigation into Hunter Biden. We've got more text messages. So here we have, these were sent from Hunter's uncle, Jim Biden, to Hunter, saying that him and Joe are upset with the accusations. They believe they're lies. They want to get together and get their story straight. Then on this one over here, Hunter is, saying that he's not allowed to be around a certain person without his father, or Hunter is explaining to Devin that he can't be around certain people. So this is from Jim Biden. He says, Hunter, it's imperative you call me or your father. Your father your father's getting as I am barraged by so-and-so. He's not responded. I have not responded. We both agree with you, trust you. So it sounds like this person here who's been highlighted or blocked out is very upset about these allegations. They're getting barraged by them. She is spreading what you told me, and I believe you are lies. Once again, we both need your side of the story. We can shove it down her throat. We'd be, so on and so forth. When your plane arrives, I'll pick you up. Hunter responds, pick me up at 7. Then Devin says, Devin is checking in on him. Remember, Devin Archer, we shared a photograph on this channel about him specifically golfing with Hunter Biden. They were on the board of Burisma together. And he says, hey, thanks for chatting last night. This life is just real torture. Yes, it seems like an endless test of my sanity. Too much to do right now. It's beyond dangerous. So-and-so won't let me see so-and-so without my father present. Can you imagine that? The F and F and F and F and so on and so forth. Torture. He checks on him again. How you doing today? He says same. Right. So that reads to me like somebody who is in a lot of pain, somebody who is, under the weight of a lot of pressure, maybe well-deserved, right? If the allegations are true, maybe well-deserved, but that's what we see. When you start to look at this type of material, now you're seeing some other pieces of the puzzle come into play, right? Now we know that Joe Biden apparently knows about it. Jim Biden knows about it. Devin's, who's Hunter's business partner, knows about it. The daughter or the person who's in the family knows about it. The family who is, the parents of that daughter, they know about it. A lot of people are having conversations about this, and they're pretty serious allegations. It's not like somebody just said, hey, Hunter, maybe don't hug my daughter like that anymore. Okay. Like that's not it. It's like, you're not allowed in the same vicinity as her. You're not even allowed anywhere near this person because of the allegations. It's very serious. And how many parents do you know in your life who have just, basically banned family members from seeing their kids? It doesn't happen often unless it's a serious allegation, unless there's something really significant that happened there. I think that tends to not happen too often in families. Now, you can also see here the final text message that we got. Hunter explaining to someone that her mom told Joe Biden that she would call the police on Hunter if he tried to see that person. So again, now the stakes are being raised. If you even, not only do I not want you to see them, but if you do, I'm going to literally call the cops on you. And that allegation is right here. I love you, so-and-so, but your mom just decided that she is willing to risk having you taken from her rather than spend a month with family in Malibu. She told Pop that she would call the police if I tried to see you. Blank. When she lies and says she never said that, call Pop and ask him. And again, all these are just being scraped right from the laptop. Apple has... I'm not an Apple guy in myself. I happen to, use Android, but apparently they have, a cloud messaging service. Everything just gets stored in the cloud, iMessage, right? So if you text from your phone, it's going to get stored in the Apple cloud. It's all going to be there. And that's where this stuff is getting pulled from. So again, a lot of smoke, maybe some fire, not beyond a reasonable doubt, but certainly not no evidence. We would say this is more than a scintilla. I think it's reasonable suspicion. I think it's absolutely that standard, maybe even more than that. I think you could potentially even get a judge to grant a warrant on this information. Truly, I think a judge would grant a warrant and say, you know what, I've seen enough. I'm going to request that we subpoena more documents. We've already seen that, right? They already issued a subpoena for this laptop. So, all right, that's it for the text messages. Let's take a look at what this means to people. Some people want to change their votes as a result. We're going to get to the chat here in a quick minute. Early voters want to change their votes. You may have seen this. I saw this on Tim Pool. I saw this with Scott Adams. I've seen a lot of people bringing this up. But basically, right around the time that the story broke, right around October 24th, the story has been going on for a while. But on October 24th, which would have been right around this time, we see a major spike. A lot of people want to change their vote. And in particular, it's happening in here, right here in my home state of Arizona. A lot of activity here. We're seeing it in some of the other important states like Florida, right? It's happening over there. And some people want to make the change. They want to change their votes, which, can you blame them? All right, let's take a look at this story from, so the big story that we kind of see is the censorship. This is what I'm in particular very upset about, that the media is just burying this story. It's very disheartening. But Scott Adams wrote this comic today. He says, Hunter Biden's laptop revealed more shocking photos. One photo shows Hunter vacationing in Wuhan and having sex with a bat. I'm getting an update, and I'm never allowed to mention this again. And that's really how it has felt. I've been looking this stuff up on different websites and different platforms. I've gone to CNN multiple times, the Washington Post multiple times, New York Times multiple times, and I'm just not seeing the story anywhere. Kind of wild, given the fact that last week we saw this story literally everywhere. It was even trending on Twitter, right? Giuliani apparently was doing a Jeffrey Toobin with an underage actress, and that has totally been proven to be just a complete falsity. Borat came out this weekend. I've seen a lot of mea culpas from a lot of people saying, yeah, he got a bad rap on that thing. Shouldn't have jumped all over it. But the point is, the media will, and the social media in particular, they'll spread misinformation if it serves their cause, but not if it doesn't serve their cause. A lot of these other links to everything have just been totally scrubbed. Hunter Biden sex tape is gone. Nobody wants to watch that anyways. Giuliani pics were everywhere. Twitter, Facebook allowed it. And the Hunter Biden stuff, Twitter has scrubbed basically all the leaks, all the videos, any stories, any mentions of it are now getting censored, essentially. This is what somebody had posted. Wow, Twitter going even further than Facebook and is no longer letting people tweet the New York Post story. This is what pops up if you try. Your tweet couldn't be sent because our link has been identified by Twitter or our partners as being potentially harmful. You can't even retweet it. You can't even share it. And I have been getting the messages myself, actually, that if you try to log on or you try to retweet a story, it'll say, headlines don't always tell the truth. I haven't taken a screenshot of it, but I've gotten that. Headlines don't always tell the truth. And it says, maybe you should read the article. And I said, well, I did read the article. And then they still hold the headline up. So like they can't tell if you clicked over, but they just don't want you to retweet it. They want you to give it a second thought, which is, ridiculous. All right. So that's it for the content on the program today. Let's jump into the live chat. I know we had some super chats that are coming in hot, so I'm going to take those first. Faith has sent those out. Let's see here. We've got, all right, so Gino started off the super chat with the 1999, which was awesome. And he said, I enjoy the show. How is it that we always hear that no one is above the law, but it seems our lawmakers are? Well, it's because our lawmakers are typically the people who say that, right? The people like Joe Biden, they'll go in there and they'll say, nobody's above the law. Hillary Clinton will say that. Donald Trump will say that. Law and order, law and order, law and order. But the rules just don't really apply to them, right? We've seen that a lot. We saw that with Hillary Clinton in particular, where James Comey came out and said that she wasn't grossly negligent for those emails, but she was extremely careless. Okay, it's just two words were changed. If you're grossly negligent, you've committed a crime. But if you're just extremely careless, then you haven't committed a crime. So they just modify a few things just to squeak themselves through. And remember, these politicians, they've got, most of them have a lot of money, a lot of lawyers, a lot of legal team, and a lot of people that either, they have dirt on or that, they owe favors to. So, if Hunter Biden and Joe Biden get taken out, that is a lot, right? There's a lot invested in that team. In the Hunter Biden, Kamala Harris, there are literally billions and billions and billions of dollars that are invested in that. So if this is allowed to wipe them out, think about that. Think about all the money that's been donated. Think about all the future government contracts that have been promised to people. Think about all of the assets that people want a piece of. If this team does not make it into the White House, all that money is gone. It's going to be a very, very bad investment. So they just escape liability. It happens all the time. And again, this is not just something that happens on the national scale. This happens locally. Look around your local police department. Look around your local, your local police officers. Look up how many of them have actually been charged with crimes or committed some sort of crime, and how many of them are still working, and how many of them are on the police force. I just saw a tweet, I haven't read the article, that in Arizona from 2015 to 2019, something like 500 people who work at our Department of Corrections have been charged with some version of a crime. But you don't really hear about that, because all of the records, everything is sort of kept under wraps. Prosecutors give police sweetheart deals all the time. Police are not convicted of many crimes because of qualified immunity. They have the entire legal backing of their union, which has good lawyers and all sorts of stuff. So if you're in the power structure, it's very easy to insulate yourself from the power structure. But if you're not in the power structure, like if you're me or one of our clients, or you're somebody who's just been charged with a crime, oh my gosh, yeah, if you're accused of child pornography, you're locked up. You get 10 years per image. Boom, boom, 10 years. You got 10 images, you're going to prison for 100 years. But if you're Hunter Biden and the DOJ gets it and the FBI get it, well, now they say, oh, his dad's a vice president. His dad's going to be the president maybe. So, what are we going to do with this thing? Well, let's just say that the chain of custody is bad. We don't trust the laptop repair owner, and we're just going to get rid of it that way. Not too good. All right, let's see here. We've got another one from USA Libertarian with a super chat. He says, if establishment politicians and officials are now too big to jail, do we need a fourth branch of government just to investigate incumbents? So it's an interesting idea, and this is something that the founders actually talked about. And there's a lot of conversation about this stuff in the Federalist Papers. So this is taking me back to my political science days, but they talked about this. And essentially the people are supposed to be that third branch, or that fourth branch, or yeah, you said the fourth branch. Really the people act as the check on the power of our elected officials. And that's what the elections are for. So when our politicians are doing some of this stuff, this malfeasant stuff, the idea is that the people are able to vote them out. That's why we have the elections the way that we do. And the people are supposed to care about these things. If the people don't care about them and they don't hold anybody accountable, or they say, Hunter Biden, who cares because Trump is such an evil Nazi, and they just wash this under the rug, and Joe Biden wins the presidency, and now he has he secures the DOJ. He's the chief executive. He's the chief law enforcement officer. Essentially appoints the FBI. He controls a lot of those branches of power, or those entities of power. So what are they going to do if all of the people who want justice just let this one slide because they hate Trump so much that they'll support Joe Biden? How are the people supposed to be a check on that corruption in our government? It's very difficult. My issue with creating an additional branch of government is that it's just more government. We don't want or need any more government, in my opinion. So I think that the people should take more of an active role in their civic duties, their civic responsibilities. It's a big reason I started this channel, to have these sort of open conversations about what is logically, I think, the most reasonable way to decide on these issues, and we can have those conversations. But as soon as people just identify into one of two camps, if you're a Trumper or a never Trumper, if you're a Trumper, all of his misdeeds, they just go undercover. Nobody cares. If you're a never Trumper, everything Trump does is a crime. It's without any excuse. This guy should be in prison, and so on. So you can see how they get divided, but I'm not sure more government helps with anything, but it's a good question though. All right. Zulu comes in with a super chat, says, "Hey Faith, save this for the end too. How many Republicans voted nay on the nefarious, unilaterally Democrat 1994 crime bill?" And as she does, Miss Amazing Faith says the final passage of the bill was 235 to 195, 46 Republicans joining 188 Democrats, 1 independent vote. Yes, still 64 Democrats voted against their party, and 131 Republicans voted no. Let's take a look. Here you go, Zulu. All right, let's turn off the chat for one quick second. Here is what it looks like. The vote on the final bill was 235 to 195, 46 Republicans joining. So it was a bipartisan bill. 64 Democrats voted against their party, 131 voted no. President Clinton hailed the House action, complimented the Republicans, and then actually pass the bill into law. Many predicted era of cooperation. Of course, that has not that has not lasted. We talked about this a little bit. Remember what the Democrats were trying to do. The Democrats back in the 90s, the Republicans were getting very hard on crime, really hard. I think it was part of Newt Gingrich's New Deal, new contract with America, that they're going to crack down on crime, and there is this contract where they're going to do all these amazing things. Well, one of their things was crime, tough on crime. And so what Dick Morris did with Bill Clinton during that whole era was pretty brilliant, but he did what's called triangulation. So they wanted to identify issues that they could just kind of seize over from the Republicans. And that's why the Democrats were so tough on crime during the 80s and 90s. Joe Biden passed or sponsored 4 different bills relating to criminal justice reform. And they did it to take it away from the Republicans. And they did a good job of that, right? Bill Clinton got reelected. The Democrats had control of a lot of the branches for a large period of time. And it worked because they were able to siphon off some of that electorate. And then they took the wind out of the sails of the Republicans. So this was something that was a political maneuver, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. Now we're really seeing why the crime bill was so devastating. We have private prisons. We've got all these different people who are in custody for stupid drug crimes. People are literally rioting in the streets because they're so upset with the justice system, which was drafted. Literally, he sponsored the 1994 crime bill, which renewed a bunch of the provisions of the earlier bills, and it's the foundation for what we have in our justice system today. Good question, though. Yeah, and we have another one from USA Libertarian. It says, can you explain qualified immunity? Can anyone really explain qualified immunity? Yeah, it's a good question. So qualified immunity is one of those things that is very abstract. There's no real clear, at least from my understanding of it, there's no real clear formal definition of what that is, right? So qualified immunity in general is this concept that if you are an employee of the government, if you're an agent of the government, you're entitled to certain levels of immunity. So you may have seen this, like, say, for example, in the James Bond movies. James Bond has a license to kill, right? He can go just shoot anybody he wants. He's got immunity from criminal prosecution for killing people. The government has just said, yep, just go, whack whoever you want, no problem. That's a fiction, but kind of not really, right? That kind of same concept applies to a lot of the things that the police are able to do. So you'll see that police will, they'll shoot and kill somebody, but they're not charged with a crime or they're not sued civilly. Why is that? Even though it might be malfeasance, even though it might be misconduct, it's not gross misconduct. So there's these different levels of misconduct. When we're analyzing a government actor doing something wrong, we need to go through an analysis. We need to say, all right, what were their duties? What is okay? What is not okay? And sometimes we go through the situation very similar to the Hillary Clinton emails situation, right? Comey was saying that she was extremely careless, right? So that was putting her in a different tier of criminal liability. If she had been grossly negligent, then that she would have basically escaped that immunity. If she was grossly negligent, then the government's not going to protect you. And so the example of that would be like, firing a firearm off into the air. There's no reason to do it. It's just negligent. If you're just firing all over the place and you hit somebody, that is extreme gross negligence. Anybody who's doing that thing would know you shouldn't do that. But if it's an officer who's shooting somebody, and you can even make a decent argument that officer could have been doing that. The officer may have been wrong. The officer may have shot that person because they thought they had a weapon, but he didn't have a weapon. But that wasn't grossly negligent. Maybe that was just regular negligence. It was just regular, any officer in that situation could have made that mistake, but he didn't do it in a way that was so egregious that it's going to break qualified immunity. So if it breaks qualified immunity, it has to be gross negligence. If it's something that's a lesser standard of regular negligence, sort of regular everyday misconduct, they're going to be protected from that. And you can't sue them. You can't charge them with crimes. You can't civilly sue them because it's protected. The government has carved out an exception for itself, saying we can do these things wrong and you can't do anything about it to us. And it applies on all these different levels because the government doesn't want to get sued. They don't want all of these lawsuits. They want protection from you. They don't want you to sue them. Their cities. They don't want you coming after their budgets and making money from them. So they just, we're immune. Yeah, we're immune from that. And so qualified immunity, it varies. It varies from thing to thing to thing. And we saw this with our analysis on Amy Coney Barrett in particular. She actually had a case an opinion that she wrote about qualified immunity. And in her situation, the cop who was the subject of the case was saying that he should be immune. So the backstory is this cop actually lied in his probable cause statement. He said, nope. The whole thing was a lie. He wrote a PC statement, used that to get a warrant. It was all a lie. And so once they went and arrested this guy and he went through the criminal justice system, he sued this cop and said, no, that guy lied in his probable cause statement. Therefore, he should be liable for all the damages. They investigated, they ransacked my house. They put me in jail for a certain number of days. They limited my freedom. I want damages. I want to get paid for that because your cop lied. The cop just responded and said, no, it's qualified immunity. I'm allowed to lie. I am allowed to actually tell lies in those documents. And Amy Coney Barrett said, no, that's not the purpose of qualified immunity. That doesn't count. But there are other judges in those types of situations who say, sure, yeah, it's pretty much qualified immunity. You're allowed to do those things. Not necessarily lying in probable cause statements, but just in general. Cops are allowed to do bad things and not be charged for them. So in my version of the world, it works. That is clamped down majorly. They don't just get to walk around and do whatever they want without any repercussions. Good question, USA Libertarian. Long answer. All right, we got Kenneth Fielder. The people have been undercut for many years. This is a full deep state operation. I will tell you what, it certainly feels that way, right? It feels that way. It feels like there is a collusion of efforts trying to suppress this story, which is why I was talking to Miss Faith about it before the show today. I was like, are we really going to talk about Hunter Biden again? Again? Yeah, we got to do it. Sorry, have to talk about it. No, if they're not going to talk about it, then we're going to talk about it. So we'll continue to do that. So we have 2 shout outs, super chats. Awesome. Kim Possible with a $4.99. Good to see you, Kim Possible. Thanks for being here. We have Bonnie Speck with another super chat, $4.99. Good to have you also, Bonnie Speck. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. We have a super chat from TIGEER_, who says, who do you personally think will win on November 3rd? Also, who will control the Senate? So I am going to tell you that I think Trump wins, and I think the Republicans hold on to the Senate. I know the polls don't show that. I don't necessarily believe the polls. I think that Trump is surging right now, and I think it's a long shot, but I think that he pulls it off. Trump, the way I analyze the debate is energy. That's it. I think it all comes down to energy. And if you look at which campaign has more energy, it's clearly Trump's campaign. We had one of the Trump's car rallies here around Arizona, and I had multiple messages from multiple people saying, oh my goodness, what the heck is going on? All of these people with Trump cars and Trump flags. There's Trump signs all over Arizona. I've seen a handful of Biden signs. I think Arizona stays red. I think Arizona, the Senate stays red. And I think Trump, squeaks out another victory. It's just an energy thing. Who has more energy and who is more interesting, I think, is closely related. People may not like Trump at all, but he's an interesting guy. And the way that our country is running right now is interesting. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are boring, right? You may agree with their policies more, but they are just boring in my mind. Not even interesting to watch, not even interesting to follow. No real new exciting ideas. And, remember, the American public, by and large, they're captivated by things that are interesting. They're captivated by things that are entertaining. And Trump has way more energy, is a lot more entertaining. You may disagree with him on every step, on every single policy, but it's interesting to watch it. And I think that's what people are going to want more of. So we will see. I do think that the Republicans control the Senate, maybe barely, but we'll see. And if I'm wrong, then I'll come out here and say it. I'll say, yeah, I was wrong. I have no personal investment in the outcome. I mean, I have an opinion. I personally think that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are like the worst people possible for the criminal justice reform, for criminal justice issues, just because of their backgrounds. Joe Biden, I've been calling the mass incarceration, the godfather of mass incarceration on this channel for a long time. I can't name any other person alive, any other politician alive who's more responsible for mass incarceration than Joe Biden. And if somebody can name one, anybody who is more responsible, I'm open to it. And I will come on this channel and eat my shoe and actually accept that. But I haven't identified anybody, and I've asked other people, who is more responsible for our current state of criminal justice than Joe Biden? Is there anybody else? I'm open to it. And then Kamala Harris is right behind him, right? She was a prosecutor for many years. And so it's been very interesting to see a lot of my criminal defense attorney colleagues who support Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It's crazy to me. You want Crime Bill Joe and Top Cop Kamala to be in the White House. Are you kidding me? These are the people who've been putting your clients in jail for the last 30 years. What are you doing? Why do you want them there? It makes no sense to me at all. Trump, on the other hand, comes out with the First Step Act, and he's had good conversations with a lot of people to push criminal justice reform. It's the first step. It's like, all right, it's kind of a no-brainer on that, at least from my professional perspective. But we will see what happens, and if he doesn't win, then we'll make do with the Biden administration. All right. So let's see. Now let's go over. So that's it for the super chats. Thanks everybody for those super chats. Thank you. TIGGEER_. Appreciate that. Tiger looks like. And then let's see what else is coming up in the chat. All right. We have, and then let's see what else. All right, so some other chats coming in. I just turned on the other chat. Appreciate your patience on that. Let's see. Teddy Kiefer says, what if a state has a castle law and police serving a no-knock warrant get shot through the door by someone legally owning a firearm and defending themselves from home intruders? That is a great question. If they shot them through the door, I don't think that, you'd have to, so all states have different statutory rules on those things. So I would look at the particular statutes for that state. What does the law say about that? If it says that, the presumption of self-defense starts when you enter the home, then shooting somebody through the door, I don't think that counts, right? That wouldn't count. They're not breaking into your home. So if you're just, blasting off in the door, there's no real threat. They haven't come through the door yet. Now, if they're coming through the door and you're sitting on your couch and you just start firing off because you think somebody's breaking into your home, that's a different scenario. Remember Kenneth Walker in the Breonna Taylor case specifically. Kenneth Walker fired back and shot John Mattingly, but Kenneth Walker was originally charged with attempted murder. He was arrested for that, but the prosecutors dropped the charges because he was in his home. He got the presumption. He got to presume that he was acting out of self-defense. John Mattingly didn't get that presumption because he was breaking in. So if that situation mirrors your home state, wherever you're, whatever jurisdiction you're in, where you have that question, I think the same facts would apply. All right, at R&R Law Group, have you ever considered running for office? That comes from A. Gentry. I have thought about it. I don't know that I have the stomach for it, quite frankly. I can't. It'd be very difficult for me to not to play the game, to play the political game. I think I have a lot more freedom on this channel than I would in politics, and so it's very difficult for me to put myself into a box, and that's what politics would require. And I don't think that I would enjoy it. Addison Owen says, I'm late to the video. What do you make of the allegations that Senator Chris Coons' daughter is on the Hunter Biden laptop? Didn't even know that. So thanks for bringing that to my attention. But that is not something that I was aware was even an allegation. So we will go ahead and log that one up for tomorrow and see what is going on with that story. Let's see what else. Andrew Richardson says, yeah, you were too honest. Yeah, it's difficult, I think. Politics is a weird beast. And I'm not real sure. It's a sad state because a lot of people, I think, who are good and highly qualified won't run for it because of what it requires of you. Kenneth Slayer says, what about child support used to put men in private prison for labor, released so county doesn't pay their back support, and rearrested and convicted for slave labor before they can get a job? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that that goes on. And even if you look back in the archives, I talked about this, I think briefly with Kamala Harris. There was an argument in California that there were going to be a lot of inmates released. They were going to release all these people. And as is typical, there's a lot of opposition to that, right? The standard, kind of everyday citizen is going to be, living and wondering, why are we releasing these criminals back into, our society? That's not good. And one of the things that Kamala Harris was doing when she was the AG is she filed, or her office filed a brief basically arguing against the release of inmates. And one of the arguments was, we use these people for a lot of labor. You know, they make all of these things for us. And so if we let them out, then we're not going to have that labor anymore. It was part of her arguments, in addition to other arguments. But it's kind of a bad argument, right? That we basically need to keep these people enslaved because we have cheap labor that we need to exploit for the state of California. And I thought that was a little bit unfortunate that was her perspective on the whole topic. All right, let's see. My super chat didn't post my question. That comes from Bonnie Speck. Bonnie, so I did answer one. Oh, it didn't post your question. So Bonnie, throw in another question and we'll make sure that gets answered. Same with you, Kim Possible. If you dropped one, we didn't see it. It just looked like there was no question attached. Kenneth Fielder with a super chat for $5 says, Trump is the president the country needs for the reason he's the only one that has kept his promises with the Democrat wall against him. All right. Did you hear about Andrea says, did you hear about the libertarian prison chaplain running against Tom Cotton? I did not hear about that. Kenneth Fielder, thanks for the super chat, Kenneth. Appreciate that. Kim Possible says, does it matter who produced the laptop? For this purpose, I mean. So, it's a great question. So this was, if you missed the beginning of the show, if anybody missed the beginning of the program, I went through the different levels of burdens of proof. And what we were talking about is, what evidence are we looking for what purpose? And if the question is from Andrea, or let's see who asked that. If the question is whether or not that evidence, Kim Possible, does it matter who produced the laptop? It doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't matter if it's just for our analysis and the conclusion that we want to ascertain is whether or not to vote for Joe Biden. Of course, it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter. If it is all fake evidence, if the text messages are fake, if the emails are fake, if the videos are deep fakes, if the photos are deep fakes, then of course, we want to know that. But at this point in time, the only thing that we have heard from Joe Biden is that he says it's all a lie, but we don't know what that means. Are all the photographs fake? Are all the emails fake? Are all the text messages fake? Because in my mind, it meets the standard of reasonable suspicion. Absolutely, it meets that standard. So we can ask questions about it and we can talk about it. But if you're asking, is that enough to incriminate somebody, to convict somebody of a crime? That answer is no. You need the actual hard drive. You need to authenticate it. You need to know where it came from. You need a really solid chain of custody, who passed it off to whom, because the defense, Hunter, let's say Hunter's, has an amazing defense team. Then what he needs to do is show that this evidence is not reliable. It's not credible. It's been passed around from too many hands. Every single time it passes hands, it opens up the opportunity for somebody to manipulate the data, to implant data, to falsify things, to, get in there and start hacking with things. So it wouldn't lead to enough, I think, for criminal culpability. Not yet. There may be more that's coming. But as it stands, I think right now it's just applicable to, the discussion that the country is having, which is whether or not this family is what we want in the White House, or whether there's any security concerns or ethical concerns or conflict of interest concerns or Kompromat sort of exposals that they would be putting the White House in as a result of their conduct. So I think it applies for that purpose, but the different types of evidence are going to have different levels of relevancy, and they're going to have different levels of authenticity, and you can make your independent judgment on each one of them. But by and large, I think that there's certainly enough there to warrant a further discussion about what is going on here. Mary Zick says the IP address of the hard drive is traced back to Hunter Biden. And in Mary's opinion, that is beyond reasonable doubt evidence of guilt. Zorro says they'll say if the laptop hard drive don't fit, you must acquit, in a throwback to the O.J. Simpson trials. Elias Diaz says, first person I see to show any sympathy to Hunter Biden. I appreciate those kind of things. When things get too political, we are still human. Yeah, that's exactly right. We're still human, and we don't need to just be, beating each other up over this stuff to a certain extent. I understand that there are legitimate concerns about Hunter Biden. I understand that it may implicate Joe Biden in those things, but it's still a family and it's still a human, and he still has demons just like we all do. So we just want to keep that in context. And you can have both. You can say that, look, I'm compassionate for them, lost his mom, lost his brother, had a hard life, had issues with drugs. A lot of those things many people can relate to. And so, yeah, maybe he shouldn't be in the White House. Maybe he should get some help, but we still want to treat him with some level of dignity and respect. Zorro says the IP address of a hard drive. Yeah, which is a good question. I mean, the IP address, right, is gonna connect to your network adapter, which is going to be the interface for the computer. And so I think what Mary was talking about was, the IP address of the computer. Now, that being said, I don't think an IP address is particularly damning evidence. IP addresses change all the time, depending on what Wi-Fi network you're on. They change from computer. They're dynamic, so sometimes you'll get new ones reassigned to you. It changes a lot, but I understand the point. There is some evidence that maybe there's additional data on these drives, like metadata or whatever, that may be more damning than just the evidence itself. Addison Owen says Delaware GOP candidate Lauren Witzke is the one claiming Chris Coons' daughter is on the laptop. Chris Coons, Gateway Pundit, is the only source running it that I have found. Yeah, the Gateway Pundit, they are putting a lot out there. Let's see if we can pull that up. Who is Chris Coons? I'm not sure who that is. Let's see if anybody knows that. Less about CP, more about the CCP. That comes from USA Libertarian. Michelle Imbrugia says, if Biden knew Hunter was using drugs, Biden should do the jail time. Such a hypocrite authorizing the crime bill. Yeah, it's a weird thing, right? He says 5 years in prison for crack, and Hunter Biden is on multiple photographs smoking crack. So, there are a lot of people who don't get the same benefit. They don't get the same leeway, and it's not right. Nicholas says, Michelle, that's who he was talking about in the recording. Hey, we got to know what's up with the FBI, though. That's from Kim Possible. Yeah, I know. The FBI it's weird, right? Every year it feels like the country is losing more and more faith in the FBI. I think in large part because what have they done? They kind of botched the Hillary Clinton thing. It feels like they're botching the Joe Biden thing too, the Hunter Biden thing. They're just kind of sitting on this stuff. What is going on over there? Just a heads up. All right, so Jay Grimm with a $10 super chat. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate that. He says, hey, just a heads up. Mark Cuban agreed to bring a technical team to analyze the metadata of the emails and images on the original hard drive. Here's to hoping for hard answers. Thank you and good luck. Yeah, I'd love to see that. I mean, I would love to see more analysis of this stuff. It's been one of my criticisms of Giuliani and this little drip campaign. It's where are the originals? Can we look at this stuff? Like, if it's so damning, let's let some other people see it, because right now it has been really limited just to the conservative, the right kind of wing ecosphere, which is the Gateway Pundit, which is One America News Network, which is the New York Post, which just endorsed President Trump, by the way, right? The New York Post just endorsed President Trump. So any of the people who already had doubts about the authenticity or the validity of the New York Post are all going to be looking at this and going, well, they just endorsed him, so of course they would put out these fake stories. And that's just going to support their refusal to believe the information that's in front of them, which is, again, unfortunate. All right, we had another super chat. This is Biden for Trump. Says, you have a great analysis and perspective. Run for president 2024. Here is $4.99 for your campaign. Well, I appreciate that, Biden for Trump. I appreciate that. It's one of those things. By the way, I just turned 35, so I am now officially eligible. So we'll see what 2024 has in store. Addison Owen just linked the Gateway Pundit. And Zorro says, to be honest, how can you tell it was crack from a photo? Which is a great point, right? And so that's why that's not criminal. It'd be very difficult to charge him with possession of crack just based on the photo. Basically impossible, because they don't have any drugs. They don't have any evidence. They don't have anything to test. It just looks bad. And so if there's no ability for them to file a criminal indictment for possession of crack, unless they have the crack pipe and they have crack and they test it and they actually show that he was in physical possession or dominion or control over the actual evidence. So if we're going up the chart and we're going to say, is that photograph evidence of possession of crack sufficient to support a criminal conviction? The answer is clearly no. Absolutely not even close. But is it reasonable suspicion? Does it meet those lower standards? It looks like a crack pipe. We there's a lot of conversation about him having an issue with that particular drug. It could be a number of other drugs. Could have been, I don't know how you smoke tobacco. I don't smoke tobacco, but could you do it in that? I don't even know, right? Could it be a regular pipe? I don't know. But for our purposes, it's a much lower standard where we want to be analyzing this stuff for our vote, whether we want to vote for somebody. And in my opinion, the media is sort of deciding for us that we can't even have those conversations, unfortunately. Good question, though, and it's a good point. Addison Owen says, I'd vote for you. Thank you, Addison. You were the only one bringing a level head to any of this. You're already better qualified. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a lot of noise on this issue. And I get a lot of flack for it, even just talking about the conversation, even just bringing up this topic. People are upset that I'm even talking about it, but I think it's that important. We have Kenneth Slayer, who says, we can test 3,000-year-old pottery for ephedrine. I think all we need to do is find his pipe. Michael Cody says, we need to start using the FBI like we do the CIA and start using the Marshal Service more. Very good organization. Oh, and DHS, just a thought. Adder says, I think there are some photos of him putting cocaine on some scales. USA Libertarian says, legalize drugs. Yeah. Well, some good comments there. USA Libertarian plus 100. Yeah, I mean, the legalizing the drugs thing is a whole conversation. It's and I don't really know where I stand on legalizing drugs, but certainly I do not think the first step would be to stop putting people in prison for drugs, at least the low-level possession drug offenses. If you're going to be imprisoning somebody for possessing drugs, that is, in my mind, wild. I've seen people go to prison for, possessing $10 of drugs, $20 of drugs. What is it going to cost to house that person for years and years and years? And what is it going to do to that person? What's it going to do to their family? When that person comes out, is there any hope that they're going to be reintegrated back into society? Of course not. Their life's over. That person is basically a dead person walking, and then society has to deal with them when they come out. We have to, put them on support and help them, with all this stuff. And it becomes a massive burden, not only on the criminal justice system, not only on the prisons, not only on society, but on that person and their families. So there's a better way to do it, and that's what I would like to see. Now, in terms of legalization, should you be able to just go into a convenience store and buy, a pack of meth? I'm not so sure about that either, right? I don't think that should be okay. I think that there'd be a lot more, drug addicts on that. And as a libertarian, you might say, well, that's their choice. That's their personal choice. We want more freedom. And I understand that, but it's also certainly concerning that might be readily available. Tobacco pipes are different. A glass pipe is common for drugs. That comes from a super chat from Kenneth Fielder. I think that's a couple from you today. Appreciate that. Yeah, Kenneth Fielder has sent a couple over. Appreciate that. Thank you, Kenneth. Thanks for being a part of the program, and thanks for all the super chats. We have Merck Tech says, wasn't there a country that decriminalized drugs and drug abuse went down? Yeah, I think that is in large part, I think there's some truth to that, right? It's sort of like you take the power out of the issue, which is why, I don't know how true this is, but I've read like in Europe that they have less high alcoholism rates, in large part because kids will start trying and drinking wine at younger ages, like 14, 15, 16. And so, it's a little bit different from the United States, where we have these young people who are just so bottled up with this, adrenaline and teenage and young 20s angst that by the time they hit 21 and they've never had any alcohol before, that they just, the floodgates open and they drink themselves to death, or they become alcoholics later down the road. And if the idea is that if we started sort of taking the power out of that, age 21 wasn't such a big deal anymore. Yeah, go have a glass of wine. That's fine. You had a glass of wine when you were 16. You didn't happen to like it. So you kind of you sort of modify the rules in a way that it doesn't make it so appealing to people who might otherwise be persuaded. And so if that effect was something that carried over from alcohol into some of the drugs, then maybe I'd be more inclined to be open to that. But certainly some of the drugs, meth and cocaine and any of the oxys, any of the opioids are highly addicting. For some people, it can just take one use. So this idea that we want to make it available so people can experiment, I don't know how good that is in general. And I don't want a lot of young kids getting caught up in any of that. So Bonnie Speck says she's posted a question 4 times. Miss Faith, can you see if you can find that question? Because I cannot see it. Bonnie, I am trying to answer your question, but I'm just literally not seeing it. So maybe just try posting it just regular in the chat. I can see your message that I haven't answered your question, but I cannot see your actual question. So just drop your actual question in the chat, or Miss Faith, if you can send that to me, please do. All right. Addison Owen with another $4.99 super chat. Don't see a question on there. And Miss Faith is telling me she doesn't see your question either, Bonnie. Robert A. says they legalized marijuana in Canada. Nothing happened. Our FBI is a two-system organization. The top of the FBI covers up crimes of the billionaires and political class. The lower half of the FBI prosecuted crimes of the common question, of the common man. Portugal. All right. Trump gets high on winning. Addison Owen says, here's $5 because I was going to Chipotle, but I watched the channel too long and now they're closed. Oh, no. Don't you just hate that? It happens to me often. I stay late at the office. I'm like, oh, it's 9 o'clock. I need some food. And then everything's closed. Sorry about that. But we're glad that you're here, Addison. Thank you very much. Let's see. Mary Brown says, my brother started drinking early, probably 13, and he turned into an alcoholic. Then hard drugs. Alcohol is the gateway drug. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. A lot of people are of that same mindset. Okay, so Bonnie, looks like we got a question from you, Bonnie. All right, here it is. So if Joe Biden didn't take money, is he still in legal trouble? Yeah, and so this is a great question. So this is something that the answer I think is yes. If Joe Biden didn't take money and like literally deposit it into his bank account, can he still be criminally liable? Well, yeah, I mean, this happens all the time. You know, people will be the intermediary and they'll sort of funnel things around them, and that's why people launder money, is because they don't want it connected to themselves. So if Joe Biden was literally engaging in conversations with Hunter Biden, and per that one email that we saw from Tony Bobulinski, he said in that email that Hunter Biden was going to hold on to 10% for Joe Biden. So now Hunter is sort of acting as that intermediary. So Joe could technically be responsible for that connection there, for orchestrating this movement of money around. And so if there's more evidence of that, then yeah, I think Joe Biden would clearly be in violation of the law. But that's how a lot of these things are structured. You know, a senator is never going to go ask for, $1 million to be deposited in their bank account. But if, the business buys this and the business is contracting through the senator's spouse or the senator's son or the senator's something, and that person still receives a benefit, the senator still receives that benefit, then they can still, move forward against that senator. And so I think that same type of dynamic applies with Joe Biden. We just don't know how much evidence is there yet, because currently all I've seen is just that one email from Bobulinski that said that Hunter was going to hold some money basically in trust for Joe Biden as part of the deal. If that allegation is true, if there's any evidence of that, if there's any actual financial transactions that took place and they can trace that stuff back down, yeah, I think that Hunter could absolutely, his misconduct could implicate Joe Biden, but we just haven't seen much of that evidence yet. Good question, though. Thanks, Bonnie. Let's see. Kenneth Fielder, I appreciated the questions. He said, you are welcome. I watch most of your vids. I am a trucker and native. I wish the best for you. Thanks, Kenneth. Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm really glad that you're here, and I appreciate all of those super chats. A trucker and native. Yeah, we actually represent a lot of truckers, a lot of commercial truckers. Arizona's really hard on commercial truckers here. If you get a ticket here and you're driving a commercial vehicle, it's a class 1 misdemeanor for most of the offenses. So if you're driving a truck through Arizona and you don't have a seatbelt on, for example, they're going to charge that as a class 1 misdemeanor, which is the same category as a domestic violence offense, same category as DUI. You can get up to 6 months in jail for that. Arizona's really hard on commercial truckers. So if you're passing through Arizona, drive safely, Kenneth. Appreciate it. More from Bonnie says, what happens if he is elected but not sworn in when it comes out this is true? So if he's elected, then he's going to be seated, right? Unless the public calls for something else, that my understanding is, if he resigns, then I guess essentially during the transition, that is the next president. So if something changes in that next line that's coming in, if Joe Biden, catches a coronavirus and is incapacitated, or if he resigns, then that team, Kamala Harris, would be the incoming president. I think that's how it works. I'm not positive on that, but I think that's how it works. And that's from Bonnie again. All right. Can Joe pardon himself if he is elected? That issue has not come up. Many people, so that issue is being kicked around right now. They actually asked Amy Coney Barrett about that specifically. They wanted to know what her opinion on that was, and she refused to answer that question. I think it's something that really hasn't been answered yet, because I'm not sure of any president that has done that. People have been saying that about Donald Trump. Is he just going to pardon himself if he loses? Maybe he will, right? Maybe he will. If any president's going to do it, Donald Trump would probably be the one to do it. So, that issue would then come up before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would have to decide, what is the presidential pardon power that is enumerated in the Constitution? What does it mean? Because to my understanding, no president has tried that yet, and it would be very curious to see what they decide. Zulu says, ha ha ha, ask Trump whether that's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think Trump probably would say, yeah, it's my, hey, it's in the Constitution. I can do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it better than anybody. I'm going to pardon myself so hard. It's going to be ridiculous. USA Libertarian says, focusing on Hunter is a distraction. Focus on China, which is why I think Donald Trump, think about this. Think how much has Donald Trump put into China, right? It's been a theme for him for so long. I'm wondering if he knew some of this stuff. And now we're seeing that these anti-Chinese dissidents are also, sort of propagating this story. And so it's working on multiple levels. But I would agree. I think the CCP is certainly concerning, and Donald Trump has been at the forefront of that issue. More from Bonnie. Bonnie says, from Kenneth, what is the best book for an introduction to constitutional law for us peasants? Oof. That is a good question from Kenneth Slayer. Good question. So constitutional law is not really an introductory book. If you want to look, so let me tell you what I studied in law school, and then I will show you the actual, there's a constitutional law book that's about this big. It's massive. It's written by the guy called Erwin Chemerinsky, and he's sort of, like the constitutional scholar in the world. And he's very, very brilliant. His analysis of constitutional issues are very good. The actual, he's written the entire, I can't find the book right now, but Erwin Chemerinsky, he wrote a book on constitutional law. Very, very good, very thick. Don't get that book. Okay. That book is not any good. Get the companion book. If you're really interested in this stuff, it's a companion book. So he wrote a book, and then he wrote a book about understanding how to read the book. It's ridiculous. But the first book is full of case law and full of all these concepts, and really just like a big compendium of cases, a lot of cases. The explainer book is much better. So Erwin Chemerinsky is the name. And if you wanted to, I would pick up that companion book. It's probably, the case book is probably $200. The companion book, maybe $50, $60. But in that book, you could actually, you could use that and just open up to whatever you want to learn about. Due process, substantive due process, procedural due process, the First Amendment, Fourth, whatever amendments you want. I think that's going to have all of the information you need, and it breaks it down in a bite-sized chunks that you can just analyze. It's great. I got the highest score in my Constitutional Law 1 class, and in large part, it was because of that book. Very, very good book, and it's something that is actually interesting to read, but you're not going to want to sit down and read the whole thing. You're going to want to use it more like an index, like, I want to know more about procedural due process. I want to know more about the right to counsel. And that's where you would open that book up and then dive in and figure out what you want. Good question, though. Very interesting. Let's see. We got Kim Possible with a question. How is Biden's net worth over $450 million on a politician's salary? It's a good question. I had no idea it was even ballparked at that high. Somebody would have to fact check me on that one. $450 million's a lot, but it's not outside the realm of possibilities, right? How much What is Nancy Pelosi's net worth and all of these other people's net worth? In large part, it comes from their spouses. It comes from their investments. Why do these people always invest in the right things at the right time? Why is that? That's weird. That's weird. They bought all these or their financial person who is managing all of this for them bought into oil futures, or they bought into wheat futures. That's weird. Who buys into pork futures? Well, these people do, because they know what's coming down the pike, and they have a degree of separation that's so far removed from any accountability that they just get away with it. So that's where they make their money. And then sort of rounding it out again, when they're talking about, is China, is the CCP going to just transfer $100 million into Joe Biden's bank account? No, of course not, because people are looking at that stuff. So when Joe Biden comes out, or when the people in his camp come out and say, hey, Joe Biden released his tax returns, we've already looked at them. There's no deposits from China. So clearly this is all fake news. Of course, there's not anything in there. That's the whole point. They're not going to siphon it through the front door. They've got all these little entities and all these other people who do these things for them. And typically it's a spouse or a kid or somebody in their family. And that's what we're seeing here. 450 million sounds like a lot, but he's been in office for 47 years. So it's a lot of deals that are taking place. Elias Diaz, should Trump supporters care more about Trump's taxes? It's a great question. If something like that bothers you, then I would look into it. I mean, personally, I am of the mindset that I like to pay the least amount of taxes as possible. That's the whole point. And I think anybody who is honest with themselves agrees with that. The goal is to pay the least amount of taxes. The government just takes your money and does Lord knows what with it, and it's useless, in my opinion. And so the tax code is written in a way that you want to minimize your taxes. Anybody who's in business agrees with that. And if they tell you they don't, they're lying to you. Nobody wants to pay extra taxes. Nobody. Because your business can't succeed if you're paying more taxes. You can't. It's such a burden on small businesses. I can't even explain it to you. I can't even tell you how much money we pay in taxes. I have no idea where it's going. I have no idea what it's doing for us. We could hire more people. We could help more people. We could, get more resources. We could do a lot more things, but the federal government wants to take it and use it to go investigate owls in in Minnesota somewhere, which I don't care about. Quite frankly, I think that's a local issue. If they want to go investigate owls in Minnesota, they can go do that on their own dime. Stop taking our tax money for it. We already pay taxes on everything. Every time you buy something, there's taxes. Every time you fill up your car with gas, there's taxes. Every time you go stay at a hotel, there's taxes. Every time you hop on an airplane, there's taxes. You pay your gas bill, your trash bill, your water bill, taxes, taxes, taxes. Everywhere we go, there are taxes. And so now they want to, tax our income and tax even more stuff with, these Energy New Deal and all this type of nonsense. So when Donald Trump, when people are up in arms over the fact that he's not paying that many taxes, I'm thinking that's a pretty damn good businessman, because all of his income, all of the money that is being attributed to his businesses as income, he is reinvesting that money back into his company. He's opening new companies, new businesses, and he's reinvesting it. That's why he's not showing any income. That's not a bad strategy. And there's nothing criminal about that. And if you're going to be deferring taxes or making prepayments on taxes and paying off your debt, like I pay my taxes quarterly. In anticipation, my tax bills are not due, but I write big fat checks to the government for Lord knows what. And they just go off into the government. And it's a prepayment of taxes. And so when a tax bill comes out the next year, if it were to say zero, well, that might be because I paid a bunch more the year before. So I don't know what people are so up in arms about over Donald Trump's taxes. I know that they want him to release them. I think that story is, it is what it is. He's got an explanation for it. He's under audit. He's been under audit for, a decade now. So I don't expect to see those things. But if people are going to come out and say he paid no taxes, therefore Donald Trump is just ripping off America, I'm of the mindset of thinking, it's great. Good. Right? Nobody wants to pay taxes. It's a joke. So I'm not personally offended by that. I don't care much about it. I think taxes are boring, and I think they're destructive. I've talked about it here on this channel. I think that taxes are about as close as you can get to sort of analogizing between stealing somebody's literal life force away from them. And I know that's a little bit extreme, but it's how I feel. If you wake up and you mix your labor with the world, you go out and you create a business, you take your energy and your creativity and you mix it in with the resources in the world, you hire people, you start a website, you start a company, and the government just wants to take a portion of that away from you. They're literally taking a portion of your life away. You're taking your life and you're mixing it with property and you're creating money. You're creating value. When the government comes and just rips that out from you, they're taking a part of your life away, whether you want to admit it or not. We've got Kenneth Fielder, who says, keeping small amounts deposited over time is a way to prevent reportable transactions. Shell companies, Hunter holding funds equals laundered. Yeah, there are different ways to deposit money. There's certain rules under the IRS that if you make big deposits that you have to actually file a form notifying them that this has been filed. And that's one of the rules. So I don't know specifically if Hunter Biden was doing that, but it is curious, right? You would imagine that they would have these different entities set up so that the money could be funneled into certain areas and nobody would ever be the wiser. And if it's all going to Hunter Biden and Hunter Biden's not elected to anything, and it's just his money and it's a private transaction between him and some foreign company, who cares, right? Ordinarily, who cares? Because it's just a private deal. It's a private transaction. But if Hunter Biden is looping that back around and the only reason he's getting paid $80,000 a month, $180,000 a month, or whatever these ridiculous numbers were, is because it's not about the value that Hunter Biden provided to the company. He wasn't getting paid for his expertise or his consulting. He was getting paid for access to Joe Biden. That is where it's a problem. Now Joe Biden's office as the vice president or as the future president is being exploited by foreign agents for financial gain. Not too good. All right, everybody, that's about it for me. Whew, that was a long show. I appreciate you bearing with me. We went through a lot of the legal stuff. I think it's important to talk about the different scales, to talk about the different rules of evidence. If you missed the first part of the show, we laid out some of the framework, some of the foundation for the continuing analysis. There's going to be more of this coming out. We're probably going to keep covering this story up until the election, unless the mainstream media picks this up. Then I think it's appropriate to keep talking about it. So I want to thank you so much for being here. As a quick reminder, if you're not already a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. A lot of our videos get age restricted. We just got notice that the last time we talked about Hunter Biden, our video got age restricted, which means it's not going to show up in the search results. It's not going to show up in the watch next or the suggested boxes. It's going to just get buried down. So if you could, I would love it. It would help the conversation. It would help the channel. It would help the country if more people knew about these issues. So I would ask you to share it. Send it to a family member, send it to a friend, send it to a non-friend, send it to somebody who needs to maybe think a little bit more about these issues. That would be great because that would help us, get these concepts out into the world. We want to invite more people to have these types of conversations where we're not just, a sycophant for one side or the other. Want to do some real logical discussion and have a real, heart-to-heart conversation. So we want more people to come in and do that. I want to thank you all once again so much for being here. One more last reminder, if you know anybody who's been charged with a crime in the state of Arizona, that's what my law firm does. The R&R Law Group, we help people facing criminal charges. We do an awesome job at it. We have an amazing team here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And so we would be very humbled and honored to have your referrals. Send them over to our website. We'll put links in the description down below. Once again, thank you so much. Stay sane out there. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 4 p.m. Arizona time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Have